budget.
Sorry, I'm going to take.
Oh, thank you.
I think we're going to start out with a quick presentation of the deck
Okay.
and then be open to.
Do we do the pledge first?
No.
No, we don't
Not
do
yet.
Do that after the hearing?
Oh, that's the
apparently?
regular meeting.
Yeah.
Do you want to do it here or stand up? Or?
Do it right here.
Can I
Okay,
use your computer real quick?
Ready to start?
sure, I'm ready. Welcome. So, first public hearing on the FY20 budget. So we'll go through a shortened version of the deck that we've been presenting to the school committee since Wednesday, December 19th. So this first slide depicts the budget process that begins in October with certification of E&D, developing internal budget tools, et cetera, bridges into November where we ramp up our activities within the district, involve distribute a kickoff memo, involve principals and department heads in the process, obtain critical priority input from our extended leadership team, and then throughout the process we're continuously updating our 5-year capital plan project list. In September, we begin to engage some of our boards, starting with the joint finance committee meeting, typically held first week of December or the last week of November, depending upon how it falls. We further assess our critical priority listing that we developed with the help of our extended leadership team in the prior month. We analyze and develop fixed and variable cost reviews, continue to update our 5-year capital plan, and that comes to a kind of a head in mid to late December when we present the superintendent's recommendation to the school committee for the first time and begin to make public presentations as we did on December 19th. In the February timeframe, that's when there's intended to be a kind of a collaborative process between school administration and the school committee, where we have several school committee budget review meetings. We adopt a tentative school committee budget as we did at our last meeting on January 2nd, and then we have our first public hearing on the budget, which is tonight. In February, we continue with our school committee reviews. We seek feedback from the school committee in advance of budget adoption, where we ask them to provide us with feedback around the budget recommendation. We typically hold a joint finance committee meeting with the boards from each of our member towns. We hold a second public hearing, which I think is scheduled for February 13th. And then, as required under statute, we look to adopt a school committee final budget. This year it's scheduled for February 13th. Once that happens, there's some what I'll call housekeeping that takes place. In March, the district treasurer is required to certify the school committee adopted budget with our member towns, with their treasurers, and then in April it comes to hopefully a conclusion when the school committee's adopted budget is presented to the Hamilton Town meeting and the Wenham Town meeting, which I believe they're both scheduled for Saturday, April 6th. So that's kind of an overview of the process. Mike's going to talk now on the next slide about kind of our recommendation from kind of a macro level and what that amounts to.
Right, so as the result of the process that Jeff just described for all of us, my recommendation to the school committee is a level service budget. And as level service is defined there as a continuation of our current services, activities, and programs. So basically the program that we're putting on for students this year would be continued into next year. And then with two additional pieces. The first is to start and implement a plan to fully fund our unfunded OPEB liability, and then Jeff explained that a couple of weeks ago about the plan to fund our OPEB liability in about 30 years. And so that number is roughly $250,000 starting for next year. And then the other added piece is $73,000 for a school resource officer that would be district-wide. And so as you can see there down at the bottom, for FY20, the level service plus that OPEB plus the school resource officer translates into an increase in our gross operating expenses after offsets of $1.9 million, or roughly 6.19% versus our FY19 budget.
So this next slide kind of takes that number that Mike just talked about and drills down into our major expense categories. Can you make that a little bit bigger? I'm going blind, so I can't see, just in case I have to reference it. So, so it breaks it down by major category. Starting at the top, obviously our most expensive category is salaries, and then down the left-hand side are the expense categories, largest to smallest, and then across the top you've got the first section. That's okay.
As big as it gets.
Yeah, I put it together so I can wing it. So that first section kind of highlights the amount, the gross expense amount that's in our budget recommendation for FY20. The second section is the same information for the current year budget, FY19, and then the third section to the right, numerical section, is kind of a comparison budget year to budget year, and then the change value and the change percentage. So you can see that there's really four major drivers of the cost increase. You've got the salaries increasing by $675,000, or 3.2%. You've got out-of-district tuition costs increasing by 31%, or just shy of $900,000. You've got the OPEB trust fund, which Mike referred to briefly a minute ago, increasing from 0 to 250, so it's a 100% increase. And then you've got $73,000 for a new school resource officer. So the combination of those four things totals about 88% of the total increase from year to year. So those are the primary drivers. This next slide, as we build our way back up to kind of the district's overall financial statement, where we'll take another look at in the next slide, but I won't go there yet. We'll take a look at gross to net expenses. We'll talk a little bit about our revenues, and then the net assessment result and how that's allocated between and to the two-member towns. This next slide is kind of an intermediary slide where we look at our gross operating expenses, and then we take a close look at what we call our expense offsets. They're not revenue sources, but they're sources of income, for the lack of a better term, that we use to offset certain expense categories. So the largest of those categories is the circuit breaker offset that you see increasing pretty significantly to roughly $950,000. We take these sources and we offset these sources against the gross operating expenses to derive a net expense amount. And it's that net expense amount that we then use to help us calculate the net assessment amount. So I'll go to the next slide. It's a busy slide, there's a lot of information on it. But it's basically our financial statement that takes us from that gross operating expense amounts that Mike first referenced, and I broke down category by category. So in that top section, at the top of the slide, you can see gross, and then you can see the offsets, and then we layer in our debt expense, which you can see is decreasing pretty substantially because we're making a final payment on the high school, middle school debt in FY19, so that's coming off our books in FY20. So you can see our total expenditures and the net result of those things. And then the middle section breaks down our revenue sources, Chapter 70 in particular. So, you know, I use our cherry sheet predominantly to derive the numbers here. You see a large negative number, and that's an offsetting entry to the debt service expense that I talked about. So as the expense for the high school, middle school rolls off the books in the debt expense account above, the MSBA debt service reimbursement that we've been receiving for the past many years also rolls off the books. So there's an offsetting entry there. And when you net the two entries together, there's a reduction in expenses of about $711,000 budget to budget. And the debt service expense account, that's partially offset by some new principal and interest associated with the Winthrop Sprinkler Construction Project, which was appropriated at town meeting last year. It's about $157,000 of new debt expense, principal and interest associated with a 7-year band plan in that account. So when you put the total expenditure line against the total funding source line, you get roughly a net increase of $1.457 million in assessment. And then what we do is we take that assessment, we look to the regional agreement, which has a very prescriptive approach to how we have to break it down and apportion it. That's the technical term in the regional agreement. Apportion it to the towns. So the net result of that apportionment calculation is a $763,000 increase, or 4.1% to the town of Hamilton, and a $694,000 increase, or 6.9% to the town of Wenham. So that, in a nutshell, that's kind of the budget recommendation and the results of that at this point. Again, this is not necessarily the final budget. This is the recommendation back to the process. It starts with a recommendation, just like every business does. And we need a starting point, and then we go from there. And, you know, things can change between now and, you know, February 13th, when the school committee is scheduled to adopt a budget. So that's kind of our recap in 15 minutes.
So, yeah, at this point, any public comments or questions, now would be the time to ask. We'll be here till about 7 in this capacity.
Hi, Elisa Greco, 189 Woodbury Street. I just have a couple clarifying questions. I noticed in the budget that farther out in 2023 that there is now a line item for the tennis courts, so thank you for that. However, I have a couple clarifying questions regarding that. It looks like it may be tied with the turf project, and I wanted to find out if that is in fact the case, and whether or not a decision has been made to try and have the courts at the high school, since Wenham has decided not to fund the Pingree courts. So that's one clarifying question. The next one is that the turf fields in 2023, the feasibility and design studies and permitting have all been done already for the tennis courts. That has not happened. So those need to be, for planning purposes, taken into account and put into an earlier time period. There's also the additional challenge of right now, with the upcoming spring season, the boys will be traveling, well, more than 10 miles each way to the Ipswich Country Club, which as a parent is not okay. And the prospect that that may continue for the next 5 years, I have serious concerns about this. So I have a couple of questions. One is with the user fee reduction, I noticed that there's close to a $600,000 district funding mandate now that the user fees have been reduced, and so thankful that the user fees have been reduced. However, I'm wondering if it might be possible going forward so that we don't get into a situation like we're in right now, where a percentage of the user fees that are collected for all athletics could go towards funding athletic facilities. Funding, repairing, maintaining. We have a line item for equipment maintenance. There should be a line item for our fields. Going forward, so we're not in a situation where we find ourselves not having a playing surface for a team that has over 60 participants each season. So that's one portion. The next one is, again, you know, I am all for, let's get these tennis courts built. If there is private funding that becomes available that might, you know, help the courts be built sooner, would the school committee consider moving them up earlier, before 2023? So those are kind of the questions that I have, so thank you.
If I could, I'll start.
Yeah.
So I'll start with and I may have to ask you to remind me what you said, because there was a lot there.
Couple of questions.
Yeah, so at the beginning, you talked about capital projects. So what Mike and I just talked about was our operating budget, not our capital plan or our capital budget. The two are two different things. They're separate. So this is what we presented was our operating budget. It doesn't necessarily include or contemplate any of those things that you mentioned. So with that said, the capital plan. So the capital plan, we've had a capital plan project list for 4 or 5 years now. Over the years, we've prioritized it a number of different times. We're in the process of prioritizing that now and having those conversations. So I would characterize the list as it currently stands as an updated capital project plan list. So, and new to the list of the tennis courts. And when I updated the list, we hadn't prioritized it yet, so I simply put a placeholder on the list, not intending it for it to show in 2021 or 2022, but to have it be on the list so it could be considered. So, along with the athletic complex. So it's a way to keep track of potential large projects for consideration by the school committee and the towns. So those are my thoughts on.
So Alyssa, the translation to that is there's no commitment to do any of those things. They're just a list of things that we could do.
So later tonight on the regular meeting agenda, we're going to talk more about the budget, and we're going to talk about one of the agenda items is to talk about capital project prioritization, and for the committee and administration to kind of, you know, different groups to hopefully give recommendations and to see if we can begin to put together a plan for this year potentially. So.
Can you just clarify where the district funding mandate for the discrepancy with the user fees, where that is coming from in the budget?
I don't know what that means.
So there is a total district funding of $578,000 for user fee relief at $329,000.
In here.
There are people, but you believe it or not, there are hundreds of people who watch
Okay.
this.
So in the spreadsheet that was 12/19/18, it says user fee relief at 59% is $329,870. The total district funding, which includes scholarship funding, family user fee relief, and total administrative costs, is $578,000. $578,000.
Okay.
Where does now that we've reduced the user fees for everyone,
Yeah.
that doesn't cover the cost of the full athletic program?
No, so
Where
it's-
does that money come from now?
So in really simplistic terms, what
Yeah.
the school committee decided to do last year by increasing its operating budget to relieve the user fees, it essentially decided to fund 75% of the athletic program out of its operating budget and fund 25% of the athletic program through the collection of user fees, right? So that's what all that math does in the end, right? And we've used the same approach and set of calculations to do that for FY20.
Okay.
So,
and is there?
so when I say the cost of the athletic department,
Yeah.
understand that there's two components of the athletic department, right? There's the operating costs of the 26 individual sports
Right.
programs, and then there's the cost of what I like to call the athletic director's operation, right? So to determine the full cost of the athletic department operation, we put the two together, right? And then we run some calculations, and we take into consideration user fee relief and family user fee relief, scholarships, et cetera, et cetera. And in the end, the net result is the district in this budget will cover 75% of that full operation, and 25% of that full operation will be covered through user fees.
Okay. And so the question.
That's how that works.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
question that it was.
It's a little complicated.
Right, it was appropriated from the operations budget to fund that, whatever percentage it is.
So last year, it was roughly 50-50.
Right.
It wasn't exactly 50-50. And then at the end of the process, there was a lot of feedback from the community, right, in the second budget hearing, right, and in between budget hearings. And then the committee, somebody on the committee made the motion to increase the operating side by, I think it was $187,000 to relieve user fees, right? Embed it in the operating budget so that the result of all that was 75% of the full operation was covered by the operating budget, what you're seeing here, and again, 25 by user fee.
Okay, and so that makes sense. Thank you
Yeah,
for that
no problem.
explanation. So the other piece to that question, because I know I had a lot in there,
Yeah, it's a lot.
is it possible to take a portion of each user fee that is given by the families or matched through the operating budget, proportionate, to put towards maintenance of the turf field, the courts,
So-
whatever gets built at the high school?
I'm gonna
So, right, just,
No, stay there,
Yep.
because this is good. So, so if you think about the math, the calculations, the sum of what's in our operating budget and what we collect from every user fee for all 26 programs results in us covering all of our costs. There's nothing left, okay? You with me? So, if you wanted to, if you're proposing what I would call kind of a contingency account, right?
Right.
Or a reserve account for athletic fields, and this is, I'm not answering yes or no, but in order to do that, you would have to increase something.
yes, and I understand that, and that's what I'm asking for. If you have a line item that takes into account maintaining equipment,
Yeah.
which is accounted for in here,
Yep.
there should be a percentage that also plans for maintaining facilities. And yes, that will result in an increase in the overall cost, and it may result in slightly higher user fees that each family contributes to. But going forward, I would encourage the school committee to consider that as a possible way to deal with both short-term and long-term needs, because we always run into this situation where we go, we haven't been taking care of our facilities, and I don't want that to happen
Right.
again.
So if we embedded that, a portion of that in our operating budget, it would increase that 6.2% number, right?
Yes.
From an operating perspective.
Or
And/or if we embedded it in a user fee, it would increase the user fee, and it would have a counter effect to what was trying to be accomplished last year by shifting the user fee funds into the operating budget. So I'm just explaining the effects of what you're proposing to the community. It certainly could be done, but it would have to be considered by the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any?
Hi, my name is Cindy Adams Harrison, and I am the proud parent of a graduating senior tennis player. I understand the difficulty with funds, and I am also a sports psychologist. And I want to know what your priorities are to groom young people who can play sports for their entire lives versus sports that they will never play again after a senior year for most of these kids. When you think of the priorities that we place on health and wellness, kids looking out that window in 6th grade and going, oh, I haven't played tennis yet. Maybe I could give that a try because it's in their visual ability to see something there at the high school. I know we're going back and forth with Wenham on the courts over there at Pingree, which are horrid, and the expense it's going to take. I don't know what the answer is. All I know is that when we're looking at sports for these kids, sports that they can play for their entire lives, they can run, they can swim, they can golf, and they can play tennis. Maybe a little pickup basketball, maybe some hockey. All right, I've worked with D1, Olympians, Stanley Cup coaches, and so what I'm asking you to think of longer term is how are we going to help educate these kids and create things that they can do for the rest of their lives? That's it, thank you.
Thank you. All right, do we have anything else from the audience?
Gary Cheeseman, 77 Pleasant Street. Questions on the proposed SRO officer. Is this going to be eventually one of 3 or 4 for each school? Is it the officer going to be assigned to the Hamilton Police Department? The $73,000 proposed, does that cover just 180 school days, or that's a full year? And fourth, could we address what discipline problems we currently have in the schools that require an SRO on the campus full-time?
I'm going to get that.
You can go for it, Mike.
I'm trying to get all the questions. So, trying to think
The
back
first
to
one would
your
be,
questions.
is this the first of 1 per school?
Just one for the whole district is
Right.
the plan. There is not any other plan. Right now, so it's something I've in support of. It's something I've worked with a school resource officer in other districts, and it's the chief. Chief Stevens was here a couple of weeks ago to talk about the duties of the program. It's not something that we're looking at a discipline issue that we're really trying to solve. It's really having a resource in the schools for the from the town police. The way I always kind of describe it is the town wouldn't have an event with 1,000 people at it and not have a detail officer on duty, and we do that every day. So that piece. Trying to think where else your questions
Yeah,
are.
the resource officer will be a part of the Hamilton
It
Police
would
Department?
be a Hamilton police officer. Right now, the town has entered into a host community agreement with Green Meadows Farm, as Green Meadows is going to actually be farming marijuana, and as part of that deal that they've struck with the town of Hamilton, Green Meadows is actually going to pick up those payments at some point in time once they become profitable. We don't know when that is, and so right now we've put that in the budget so that we can start this program in September, with the ultimate goal that Green Meadows, that Hamilton would be funding that through the Green Meadows agreement. And it's 180 days. It's from what we've learning through the town. It is for the school year, And then Hamilton is then looking at, because it would be a full-time Hamilton police officer, and they cover a lot of vacations in the summer, they're actually looking at this additional position would be able to cover their overtime costs that they normally have to pay when people go on vacation, and so that the summer months would get paid for out of the town of Hamilton's budget.
Thank you.
Right, any other comments?
I'm Carrie Gelsma from 35 Hilltop Drive in Wenham. I'm also on the Wenham Finance Committee. My questions aren't really digging into the weeds. They're a little broader in perspective and scope. The towns and the school district face a lot of upward pressure on the budget, as we all know and have experienced the past couple of years. And it looks like it's going to continue to get that way in the future. And the legislature in this session and Governor Baker have both prioritized Chapter 70 funding, redoing the formula. And we've talked about this a little bit in the past at the school committee meetings. I was just wondering what the district and the school committee's plans are to be involved in that process and to hopefully get some funds allocated to our district, if there's any plan at all yet.
So from a committee perspective, we actually don't have any plan at all. We, do have a pretty good working relationship with, Brad Hill right now, and would look forward to continuing that relationship and actually broadening it. And obviously, we would definitely want to increase any sort of involvement with, the governor and the legislature about increasing funding coming in from, assistance from the state level. So, while it's not on our current agenda, it's something that we would also, usually these things are too loud.
Yeah.
Something that, we would definitely be interested and open to looking into in the future, both short-term and long-term.
Do you know, do you guys or does Representative Hill or Senator Tarr have any kind of general, it's been under discussion for several years. Is there any sense now in terms of, we want to ask for 4% more than we normally get? Is there any kind of general request or message that we have that's formulated or
What they're
organized?
looking at as far as the reform goes is actually reforming the Chapter 70 formula.
Yes.
Right now, it
Right.
undercounts, special education, it undercounts health insurance, and
Right.
it doesn't count retiree health insurance, and so those are the pieces that I was actually at a meeting for the Superintendents Association last week down in Malden that was completely on this topic, and that's what everybody's looking for, is to reform the Chapter 70 calculation so that it would, turn into a benefit for all of the districts. The trick is, we gotta make sure this isn't a zero-sum game. I think what we hear is anywhere between $1 and $2 billion is what would be needed to actually do this right. And so those are the questions of where does the money come from, I think, is the
Right.
real big question.
And, well, I guess then it sounds like it's not thoroughly fleshed out at this point. So I guess I would just ask if there's any kind of organization with other school districts or with other school committees to try and flesh out a plan or a vision of what that would look like in terms of increasing the total amount of funds available, so we would get more through the existing formula, as well as, if the formula needs to be recalculated,
Right.
what would we request?
There's-
And I was
there's-
just curious.
There's actually there's three groups that are really working on this right now. So it's the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, which these are all members of.
Yeah.
The Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, which I'm a
Yeah.
member of, and the Mass Teachers Association /AFT, the teachers unions are all, so it's a really kind of an odd conglomeration of bedfellows there, but
Everyone
that's,
wants more money.
but everybody's there, they all want the money, and so it's an interesting coalition. But
Yep.
those three groups, those three real groups are on board with this, and that's
Okay.
why you're hearing that Governor Baker, in his own, and when House 1 comes out, his budget, he's going to have a proposal too, and I think Senator Sonia Chang Diaz actually presented legislation last week with her plan. So there's a lot of different plans out there, and that's, you know, these groups all have input into that, and we'll see what comes out of the budget process this year, and that comes out of the legislature. You know, it's something they've known about and we've talked about with, you know, Representative Hill and Senator Tarr, and then, as I said, you know, I've been in several meetings with the Superintendents Association and local state reps about why this is necessary. So they know. They tried to do it last year and they couldn't pull it off, but I think this is pretty likely something's going to happen this year.
Did we, I know I received an estimate of the amount of money that would be given to the school district where I work if this formula was implemented as recommended by the Foundation Budget Review Committee. Do we have an estimate for Hamilton Wenham?
The one I've seen is about 400,000.
I know one of the things that Brad Hill was pushing for last year, which didn't go anywhere, was a commission to look at both regional transportation and including special needs transportation in circuit breaker, which it's not currently a part of. And it didn't go anywhere, but I'm hoping that he can reintroduce.
I think we did get a little more money to the existing.
So he got some more money in the circuit
Placeholder,
breaker, but
yeah.
what Janice is saying is
Yeah.
transportation is a big piece of what we have to do with students who are in and out of district placements, and there's no reimbursement whatsoever for that. So.
Yeah, so I mean, we all sit here trying to figure out how to create a quality education for our kids, which they deserve, and a lot of work goes into it, and I appreciate that. And in terms, we're talking about enlarging the pie, that's just a way to possibly enlarge the pie rather than us, you know, fighting over the existing pie more. So that's where that question came from. Another one of my kind of zoom out questions is regarding strategic planning. And in the, what do you call it? The district improvement goals for 2018-2019, there's a goal to develop a draft strategic blueprint and have it finalized by January 2019. And I guess a couple questions. One, I was wondering, where are you in that process? And is that, I mean, I'm not sure what a blueprint is. Is that a comprehensive, like, longer-term strategic plan where you engage all the various stakeholders in developing it?
It's more of an educational improvement plan is really what it is, and that would drive our annual school improvement plan. So I'm in the process of getting together with you know, our school friends groups to circulate a draft that the leadership team's put together. So, and then it'll get a little more widely circulated from there.
But the school committee has not seen
School
it
committee
yet or been
hasn't signed
consulted.
off on it yet, and January's not gonna. I'm gonna miss that target.
And
Okay.
it's an educational plan, not a financial plan.
Right.
It's not a traditional business plan.
Right.
So I'm assuming everyone knows what I'm referring to when I talk about a longer-term comprehensive strategic plan, of which these pieces would be a part. Is that something that, and you know, we've talked about capital planning, technology planning. We have these increasing pressures on the budget, overrides, we need new school buildings. There was a capital plan that was rejected last year by the taxpayers, and I just think that having a strategic vision and plan in place can help prioritize everything and help decision-making. And I know you guys work hard and you do good work, but you know, when you talk about, for example, the capital projects, the school committee says, can you offer us some advice on prioritizing the projects? And then the district staff is like, well, we were hoping you would offer us some advice on the projects. And so that's an example of how you could prioritize things, is having a strategic plan. So I guess I was wondering if that's something that you guys would consider, and that practice is supported you know, by many organizations. I could stand here and list off in the field of finance, state and local budgeting, in the field of education, the Massachusetts Department of Education. So, you know, it is an effective process and way to make tough decisions, and also a way to get your, you know, students and level of education where you want it to be, given, even with changing moving parts, like school building or Long Meadow.
Sure.
Is that something that you guys would be interested in doing?
Well, I mean, that's something that we've definitely, again, later on the agenda tonight, we have, capital projects prioritization, on the schedule to be talked about. And so it's something that we have, do continue to do, but, as, we prioritize a list, and then, other things keep coming up that we, probably could do a better job of as a committee, coming up with a long-term goal. So we're actually giving the administration better guidance on what to be doing long-term, and at the same time, really coordinating with, all the boards within town, so they sort of know what we have, on the agenda, in the long term. I think that's something that the board, this committee can do a better job of really trying to come up with a plan, for all of you. But, as of right now, it seems that we prioritize and then we shuffle the priorities, a few months later, which definitely is not good for the long-term success, financial success of any of these institutions.
So, and the capital planning process is one piece of kind of a broader strategic plan process, where you go, you engage students, community members, taxpayers, teachers, administrative staff, school committee members, consultants who can help you create your vision and the longer 3 or 5 year plan. Is that something that you would be willing to engage in or consider?
So, yeah, I mean, I think, I'm sorry if I didn't just make that clear, that I do think that's a great idea. It's something that we should be working on.
Is it something that the towns would be willing to work with us on? Because I think part of the issues are timing. Oftentimes, like, we have timing when we need things, and the town has timing when they need things. And when those things happen at the same time, it causes extra pressure points. And then we might have some lull times, and if we could even those out, we might not have those pressure points if we all had an agreement on the strategic plan.
Yeah, and I mean,
Especially around capital mostly, but.
Sure, and I think in the past, at some of our bigger meetings where we've had the towns, the boards of select, the FinComs, the school committee, people have expressed interest in doing on capital planning, a more joint capital planning. But again, I'm talking about an even broader strategic plan. There are many examples. I'm happy to submit to, I don't know if you have a docket or if there's a way to submit information to a docket or to the committee, but I have some right here. And there's lots of school districts around here that have a strategic plan that all the pieces fit into. But yes, absolutely. And I mean, it would be something that the school district would probably be the driver for in organizing it, as it should be, and then get other willing parties to participate, which I think
Carrie, that's actually something our capital planning working group has been talking about. And, talking about the need for one. So actually, we had a meeting tonight before this meeting and talked about it, and it was something I'll update the committee on in a minute, but we talked about that.
Okay. All right, those are all my questions. Thank you for your
you
time
very
and
much.
info.
So,
All right, just.
so how would she get that information to us? Like, email it to us, or?
We have email addresses, I would imagine she could
I-
email us all that
Send it to
info
you.
if
I
she
can't
wanted
hear
to.
anything.
You can easily just send it to me.
Am I deaf? Okay.
Email it to David.
Yeah, your eyes and my ears. I can't hear anything. Okay, email it to school committee?
Yeah, you can email it right to me.
Okay, great,
Thank you very much. All right, just because of the time, we're gonna have to move on to start our regular meeting because we have a packed agenda tonight, which,
It's a hearing, you have to listen to the public until they're done.
so,
I mean, granted, it can be done, they can be done, but.
so do we have any other speakers? All right, well, thank you very much for your involvement, and now we'll move on. Let's actually start by Pledge of Allegiance now. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for
break to approve the warrants.
Yeah, you should officially close the hearing.
All right, so at 7:21, I'm officially closing the
Public hearing.
public hearing. And
Calling the school committee to
so
order.
now at 7:21, I'm calling the school committee meeting to open, and we're actually now going to break for the approval of the warrants.
So you still need
Who wants to go?
What?
You
still
for it.
need signers, right?
And we're back. For the warrants. So this would be the point if there's any more citizens' comments that can come in now. I didn't think so. I don't have anything prepared for the chair's report, so we'll jump right ahead to the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you, David. First off, last Thursday, January 10th, the Hamilton Wenham High School DECA team competed at the District 3 Career Development Conference, and that was held at Merrimack College in North Andover. We had there were 11 schools and over 850 students participating in this business competition. There were over 50 categories of marketing, hospitality, finance, and entrepreneurship. We've talked about this before, but the Hamilton Wenham sent 176 students to the conference. And out of that 176, 105 qualified for the State Career Development Conference, which will be held March 7th through 9th in Boston. At the award ceremony, those who were placed in their top six categories were called to the stage to accept an award. And just to give you a breakdown, we had 15 first place awards, and that was 22 students represented in those 15 awards. 11 second place awards, and again, 15 students represented in those awards. 10 third place awards representing 13 students. 13 fourth place awards representing 17 students. 14 fifth place awards representing 24 students. And 12 sixth place awards representing 14 students. So congratulations to all 176 DECA students who participated, and definitely congratulations to Advisor Laura Wheeler. Great work, and it's just amazing how this program's grown.
And out of over 800 students.
Out of 800 students, right. We
Yeah,
had
when you look at it.
175 of
Yep.
them.
Yeah, we got
And
a lot.
105
We
of
got a
them qualified, so they're going to move on.
Yep.
Mike,
pretty-
when
pretty
is, do
amazing.
we know, when is the next level of competition?
It's March 7th through the
March.
9th in Boston. All right. Also, coming up this weekend, don't miss the musical at the Miles River Middle School. They're going to be putting on Peter Pan. There's over 75 middle school students involved in the production, which is always great to see. Again, that's almost a quarter of the school. And that'll be at the Farini Dramatic Center for a limited run. So tomorrow night at 7, Friday night at 7, and then Saturday afternoon there'll be a 2 p.m. matinee. So bring the kids. Should be a great show. Tickets are $10 for students and $12 for adults, and you can purchase them in advance at hwfota.org or at the door. Also going on in the middle school next week, it'll be a busy couple of days. They are thrilled to be continuing their relationship with their sister school, the Shanghai Gaokao School. Miles River will be hosting 18 middle school students from China from January 22nd through January 28th. This is the 4th year of our exchange with the Shanghai Gaokao School. It's a really great program. Those students actually do homestays with host families from the middle school for the time while they're here, and they've got a couple of trips planned for next week, so it should be it's always a great program.
Yeah, some of the kids actually still email back and
Still-
forth.
yeah,
Some of
still
the
keep
kids
in
of
touch.
when they met who have taken Mandarin, so it's a great.
Was it last year or the year before we had all that snow when they arrived? It was 2 years
It
ago.
was 2 years
2
ago.
years ago, because
Yeah.
there was not
They-
much snow,
they
yeah.
arrived
2
just
years
in
ago,
time
there
for
was
the
a lot,
storm.
yeah. 2 years ago, they got to experience a snow day in the United States.
So are they still looking for host families? Because I had seen a
Last I
message
saw,
about
there was
that.
one host family that they were looking for, but
Okay.
that was last week. I don't know
Okay.
if Craig's gotten one since. And unfortunately, we actually won't be able hosting the high school counterpart this year. The high school group, the school that we do the exchange with in China for high school is actually in Shenzhen, which is right next to Hong Kong. They lost a week of school due to a typhoon, and so they're making up the classes during the time they would normally come. So
And they got to go sledding during that storm. For the first time, a lot of them got to go sledding, so classic New England.
yeah, absolutely. So we also, just a reminder, nomination papers are available for the 3 open positions for 3-year terms as members of the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee. Nominations papers are available at my office, 5 School Street in Wenham. The papers must be returned with at least 40 registered voters' signatures from the towns of Hamilton and/or Wenham on or before 5 p.m. on Monday, February 25th. And we'll have the signatures verified and names set out by February 27th.
And it's 5 PM, because I know in the past it's been,
That's what Donna wrote, 5 PM, so.
okay,
I think she's going to stay late on Monday.
been earlier before, so, okay.
And if you have any questions, please call Donna Bunk at 978-626-0821. And then last, I'm really happy to announce that House Resolution 217 was signed last Friday by Governor Baker. And so this House 217 is an act relative to regional schools. The act allows regional school districts to designate one member to sign payroll and accounts payable warrants. The designated member is required to report to the school committee on their actions relative to the signing of warrants at the next school committee meeting. So we want to thank Representative Hill and Senator Tarr for their assistance in getting this passed. It was a 2-year process, but it's done. So something we can probably want to put as a future agenda item to talk about this and figure out what we're going to do. So,
Thank you,
thanks, Stu,
Janice.
for hounding
Thank you,
me.
Janice. Janice worked hard on this.
She did.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, so up next, the consent agenda. Just the field trip to
Model
Model
UN,
UN.
So do we not have minutes again? Is that,
That's gonna come the next meeting.
okay. Yeah, I didn't see him in the Dropbox, so I was curious as to,
Nope,
okay.
we can schedule that for the next meeting
Right,
to approve all of
absolutely.
them.
Just want to
What?
make a motion, or?
Oh, yeah. I wasn't sure if anybody, if David wanted to ask if anybody had any questions or for that, for bullet. Okay. I move that the school committee accepts a consent agenda with the field trip to Model UN in Cambridge. There can be no changes.
Second?
All those in favor? Okay. On to new business. First up, we have the student government presentation.
Hi, I'm Brianna Borick. I'm the student government advisor at the high school, and we have the student body officers here to give you some updates on what's going on at the school.
Hi, I'm Will Glovsky, and I'm the student body secretary, as well as the State Student Advisory Council delegate from our school and from our region. And I'm here to give an update on the happenings of this council. And so the council has been rather inactive around the holiday season. However, there are two main things that would impact our school that are of note. And one of them is we're in the process, a committee I'm part of is in the process of creating a guidebook for student councils across the Commonwealth that would be sent out to hopefully in the commissioner's newsletter to schools across the Commonwealth. So we're working on that. And then in our regional council, I'm the chair of a committee that's in the process of writing a prose piece by students about nicotine policy that will be sent out hopefully to schools across our region and will be given to the Wellness Council, which I'm also a part of, Friday.
Will, where that's a policy, is it a policy recommendation or a
it's-
procedure recommendation?
It's a policy recommendation.
So that really should come to the school committee.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
As soon as it's drafted and done, I will send it over.
And the wellness committee obviously could endorse it, and yeah, that would be
Yeah,
great.
awesome,
Okay.
thank you.
Hi, my name is Jack McMahon, and I'm the student body treasurer for Hamilton Wenham. And I'm going to talk to you about HW Gives Back briefly, and that is the school fundraising organization. And so since the last time, we've had a couple new developments for HW Gives Back. The first thing, we had a sweater fundraiser over the week before break to raise money for the Merrimack Relief Fund. So we had students wear ugly sweaters to school and then bring in money for the Merrimack Relief Fund. We raised over $100 for that. And we also had a survey sent out to all the students at the school recently to get their feedback on HW Gives Back, and we got some good recommendations based on that of what charities they wanted us to donate to and what we should focus on for the rest of the year.
Hi, I'm Emily Vanderwild, and I'm the Student Body Vice President. I'm going to give you a couple updates on what's been happening at the school. So the week going into Thanksgiving break, we had Spirit Week. That was really successful. We also raised a lot of money for charities that week. We had our Stuff the Cruiser event where the student population brought in over 400 toys for Toys for Tots and other charities. And we also had a fundraiser for Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos, and we raised over $1,000 for that charity, which was super successful. And then we have new fundraisers being run by the senior class of Shave Your Head / Lop Your Locks, where students and faculty members have agreed to donate their hair if $1,500 is raised by early February. We also have the seniors bringing back some of their senior activities. We have a Red Sox game and Six Flag events planned for May, I believe, or late April, early May. But yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Lauren Verge. I'm Student Body President, and I just wanted to update you guys on some of the extracurricular clubs that are doing awesome stuff at the high school right now. I don't have all the details, but briefly, I know the mock trial the other day had their first trial, and they actually won, which was a really exciting accomplishment for them. The Interact Club is currently doing a polar plunge fundraiser where if they raise $1,500 to eradicate polio, they will be having a polar plunge event, and Mr. Tracy has offered to polar plunge, which is exciting. The choir, harmony, and a cappella groups at the high school have a concert on January 29th at Danversport, and it's their annual Hearts and Flowers event, which is a great fundraiser for the high school choir program, and information on that can be found on the website if you're interested. I was going to update on DECA, but I think that's been covered. And then finally, the Robotics Club, which is new at the high school this year, is doing some really awesome things. We're in our 6-week competition period, which means we just got the competition packet from the national organization, and we're in the process right now of creating our prototypes using the materials and Mr. Walsh's manufacturing shop, which is really cool. And we'll have our competition, I think, at Reading High School in late February or early March. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good.
Is there a newspaper at the high school?
Yes, just started.
The general.
Okay.
There's actually a journalism
Yes, if there's a
course.
newspaper at the high school.
I was interviewed for it this week, so I'm thinking the next edition's coming out in the next week or two.
Okay.
All right. So up next, we have the district financing, rescinding authorized but unused borrowing balance. That's Exhibit C, page 16, backside of 15.
Thanks for that helpful bit of information.
I started the sentence, I figured I should finish it.
16 is the backside of
I think this meeting, you actually have two financing items on it. One is something we haven't done in a long time. It's called a rescinding vote of money that had been approved by the town in the past. And the other is something we've done every once in a while, is approving the sale of bands or bond anticipation notes for the winter fire suppression system. And Peter Frazier from Hilltop Securities, they've gone through a couple of names, so is here to help us with any questions and to speak specifically on the rescinding of the vote of unissued bonds, unused bonds, because we really haven't done that before. And interesting enough, Peter, you represent, he's our bond advisor, represent Wenham and Hamilton.
Yep, and about our office in Boston represents about 180 Massachusetts municipal issuers, cities, towns, districts, and authorities.
And we actually, I believe, worked with Peter when we built the middle school, high school, and we're still working with Peter. And interesting enough, the bond counsel at the time was Rick Manley, and Rick Manley is the bond counsel for the bonds, the bands that we're going through to approve today. So it's been pretty stable with the people that we've been able to deal with during this time. I'll let Rick speak a little bit about the rescinding motion. I'm going to hand out copies which are slightly revised. I don't know where I got the figure of $113,000 to give him. It's $117,900, and so $117,338. So while he speaks, I'll just hand you revised copies of the motion that you're going to vote on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, good evening, and thanks, Don, for inviting me to speak with you today. This is very brief. Essentially, as you may recall, back in October of 2013, the district authorized $930,000 for the Bucher heating system replacement. Over the course of the next few years, the work was done. Some grant monies came in from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. A bond issue was sold in 2016 for a balance, but what was left over, unused at the end of the project, was this $117,338. Under Mass General laws, if an issuer of city, town, district authorizes debt, that authorization never goes away unless you actually borrow against it, which would reduce it, or rescind it. And so that's what you're being asked to do now is simply a housekeeping function where you can't use the remainder of the authorization for anything but for what it was originally intended for. And since that's done, it just leaves it hanging on your books until you clean it up. So hopefully that's clear enough and sort of not very controversial.
And why would someone not do this?
There's no good reason, again, because if you no longer have the project to work on, and this happens all the time with municipal borrowings, because when you authorize the debt, you really don't know exactly to the penny what you're going to need to do the project. And so, and you're not permitted to knowingly overborrow. So, at the end of this project, you guys had borrowed for all that you needed, and just leaving this unissued balance.
And so a bond has been issued for this remaining amount that was authorized?
Yeah, in terms of the breakdown of the costs, there was $241,546 that was received from the Mass School Building Authority. There was a pay down, essentially district resources that were used that paid $230,332, and then there was a bond in October 19th of 2016 that covered $340,784, which leaves us from the original 930, that 117,338.
Thank you.
Do you want to make a motion?
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee vote that the $117,338 unissued balance of the $930,000 authorized to be borrowed by vote of the committee on October 24th, 2013 to pay costs of replacing the Bucher school heating system is hereby rescinded and no further force or effect.
Second.
All those in favor? Oh, unanimous. Thank you. And then moving on to the next is the with the financing.
Now, the second one is
But not really.
School committee's has always handled these as 5 motions. We basically say, I move 2 and do each of the 5 things. You can read all 5, but you can read all 5 at once and take it as 1 motion, but that assumes that the vote's gonna be the same way on all 5 pieces. So it's whichever way you wanna do it. And so whoever's gonna read the motion, if you decide to do separate ones like we've basically done in the past, You just take the first one and say, I move the school committee approves the sale off, and just take it from there. Stacy, do you have a copy? Because
I
this-
do.
Okay, this is one you have to check to put the votes down and sign.
Yep.
So whoever is, now, this is the process, the legal process to go through when you want to borrow money. And you approve the sale.
Okay.
The sale was made on January 10th. Oppenheimer and Company came in with the low bid. The bid is a combination of interest and a premium that they pay. Their interest, as it will show here, was 2.75%. And they turned out, as I say, to be the lowest cost to the district. And historically, as long as, bond advisors and bond counsel approve of the low bidder, we take the low bidder.
And so this borrowing is to cover the cost of the Bucher boiler?
Excuse me, I didn't.
What is the purpose of this borrowing?
With the sprinkler.
Winter supply processing system.
Okay. So this is so that we can get the money to do the work, but the work will be completed in the future, in the summer.
The work, I think, will be completed this year,
So the work started
this
with-
fiscal year.
So a couple meetings ago, I recommended an engineering firm, a designer.
Yep.
And we've hired Richard D. Kimball, and they're working on the design. So their first invoice is due to me probably on January 31st. So we'll cover the cost of the designer as well as the general contractor.
Okay.
And the anticipated completion date is August 31st.
Okay.
And usually we convert, on larger projects, we end up after a year, convert the bands into bonds. I think, and Jeff, correct me if I'm not right, the intention is, you can roll over bands for 10 years. And the intention is that these will be kept as bands, but they'll be paid down every year. You have to start paying them down in third year, in the third year, but the intention is that the district will pay them down starting at a year from January 23rd.
Yep.
And the operating budget, as we've discussed previously, incorporates a 7-year band plan paydown strategy, which includes principal and interest, but beginning in FY20.
If there's no other questions, or you might have a question on each one, whoever's going to read the motion can start.
Do you want me to just start reading the motions and then we can vote? I, the District Secretary of the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District, Massachusetts, certified that at a meeting of the Regional School District School Committee held on January 16th, 2019, of which meeting all members of the committee were duly notified and at which a quorum was present. The following votes were passed as indicated below, all of which appear upon the official record of the committee in my custody. I hereby to approve the sale of a $850,000 at 2.75% general obligation bond anticipation notes of the district dated January 24th, 2019 and payable January 23rd, 2020 to Oppenheimer and Company, Inc. at par and accrued interest, if any, plus a premium of $4,075.
So I just have one quick question. So the district secretary is Donna Bunk for purposes of election papers. But Stacy is the secretary of the committee.
It's officially the secretary of the committee.
Okay.
So
So she
Just
has
because
a
it says the district secretary
Yeah, it
of
says
the
district
Hamilton Wenham
secretary,
Regional
yeah.
School
Secretary of the
District, so I
committee.
wanted to be sure we were clear. Okay.
It's the secretary of the district as opposed to,
That would sign these papers.
Secretary of the school committee would sign those
so
papers.
it would be a
Secretary.
member of the school committee that's designated as the secretary.
Okay.
We need a
And
second.
she's-
It's
and
just,
You need a
Stacy's
second.
Okay.
recording the vote.
You need a second.
We'll sign the document.
Second.
So, all those in favor? 7 yeas.
And so you don't have to read the top part for each motion.
Right. further voted that in connection with the marketing and sale of the notes, the preparation and distribution of a notice of sale and preliminary official statement dated January 3rd, 2019, and a final official statement dated January 10th, 2019, each in such form as may be approved by the district treasurer, be and hereby are ratified, confirmed, approved, and adopted.
Second.
All those in favor?
And these are the documents that they're talking about.
That's 7 again.
Yep.
Bond council, you're in their money with all these documents.
Further voted that the district treasurer and the chairperson of the committee be and hereby are authorized to execute and deliver significant event disclosure undertaking in compliance with the SEC Rule 15C2-12 in such form as may be approved by bond counsel to the district, which undertaking shall be incorporated by reference in the notes for the benefit of the holders of the notes from time to time.
Second.
All those in favor? 7 again.
Further voted that we authorize and direct the district treasurer to establish post-issuance federal tax compliance procedures in such form as a district treasurer and bond counsel deem sufficient, or if such procedures are currently in place, to review and update such procedures in order to monitor and maintain the tax exempt status of the notes.
Second.
All those in favor?
It's unanimous.
Again.
Further vote that each member of the committee, the district secretary, and the district treasurer be and hereby are authorized to take any and all such actions and execute and deliver such certificates, receipts, or other documents as may be determined by them or any of them to be necessary or convenient to carry into effect the provisions of the foregoing votes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
All right.
And-
So do you guys have the
Stacy?
official?
Do you want me to, I'll come sign.
Yeah.
And Stacy, she'll sign this, and she agrees to what is said in the next paragraph, that it was open, a meeting open to the public, posted, all that sort of stuff. And I will be in touch with Stacy and Dave later on, because there's documents you have to sign.
So does she need to read this last paragraph?
That's it.
No, she's
No,
just
okay.
confirming.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you, Peter, for coming.
Peter, thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
We've heard your name a million times, but never seen your face.
Excuse me. Okay, up next is the Assistant Treasurer recommendation.
So I finally have some good news on an assistant treasurer recommendation.
Sorry, Gene.
After 5 or 6 months of searching, so if you recall in the fall, we amended the stipend amount and the approach, and I posted the position. After some time, we received 4 applicants. 3 applicants met all of the minimum qualifications. We conducted phone interviews of the 3 applicants. Of those 3 applicants, narrowed the field down to 2. I met with a team from my office and with those 2 candidates, and then we unanimously selected a candidate. So if you refer to the memo that I have provided to you all, I'm recommending that Mr. Kevin Mahoney be appointed as the district's assistant treasurer, beginning February 1st and running through the end of the fiscal year. Kevin has over 30 years of experience in municipal and school finance. He's currently the assistant superintendent for Minuteman and is planning to retire this summer, and seems to be building a little business for himself as serving multiple districts as a district treasurer. In addition to his current capacity as assistant superintendent at Minuteman, he's also the district treasurer for the Lincoln-Sudbury Regional School District. So he's very qualified, very experienced. The entire team, including Dawn, again, unanimously felt he was the right candidate. And I am recommending that you appoint him.
How has, is this increasing an expense we've had, or is it the same rate as what we've paid in the past?
Well, I think we talked about that in a lot of detail at a meeting in the fall,
Yeah.
where we talked about the strategy. So we agreed to a $4,000 stipend for the year,
Yep.
which would cover the first 40 hours for a 12-month period. So I've prorated that for the 5-month, 5-month period from February 1st to June 30th, and I've got that in my memo to you. And then if I recommend him and he's reappointed for the full year beginning July 1st, 2019 for FY20, then the full stipend amount would apply.
Great. So we need a motion to approve the recommendation.
You need a motion to appoint.
You need a motion to
Yes.
appoint Mr. Mahoney to
Mahoney.
as the district
Yes.
assistant treasurer.
Thank you.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee move to appoint Mr. Kevin Mahoney as a district assistant treasurer for the period of February 1st, 2019 through June 30th of 2019.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous? Thank you, Jeff.
Congratulations, Mr. Mahoney.
All right.
It was critical that we make that happen. Don's scheduled.
Don's going on vacation.
He's going on vacation in March.
I was waiting.
If we don't have an assistant treasurer, our staff, our 300-plus employees don't get paid.
Excuse me.
So, beginning February 1st.
Hopefully that's the only day he has to work.
Hopefully, that's right. Yeah, so we'll get Kevin trained during the month of February. He's agreed to come in on a couple of different occasions. We'll get him up and running. We'll run him through a payroll cycle before Dawn leaves, and then middle of March, Dawn's on vacation, and Kevin will take the reins.
That's a lot of work you did for this and work ahead, so thank
I
you.
went into it, so it
Yeah.
took a long time.
And it's still,
We gotta-
you still have work ahead of you
Yeah,
to
we got
train.
a
and
great
all that.
candidate, though. Kevin's I know Kevin, so he's very qualified. We're lucky to get him.
Yeah, thank you for your work, sir.
Well, and the thing that was impressive about him is that he has regional
Regional school
understanding.
districts, right.
So,
Yeah, and I was curious, like, okay, he's assistant treasurer,
like, why is he doing
why
this?
is
He must be
doing this?
retiring, yeah.
Retiring.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean, you answered my question, I was gonna ask, like,
Yeah.
why would he wanna do
So
this?
he can only make
It's Hamilton
a certain
Wenham.
amount.
Amount of money.
You
Yeah.
can only make the gap between what he was making and what his pension.
Yeah, I figured that, I was just
So-
like going, this is like too good
So
to be
he's
true,
limited,
why?
yeah.
Yeah, it was, it just, the stars kind of aligned. I know
Yeah.
that sounds corny, and he only lives a couple of towns over.
Perfect.
That's
So,
awesome.
Yeah, so he's familiar with budget sense. He's dealt with
Nice.
the same bank. that-
He does your, is the equivalent to your position, right?
Yes,
Assistant
yeah,
superintendent?
Yeah.
So
So
he
he's,
knows
yeah,
what's going on.
he's a good guy, so.
Great.
All right, cool.
All right, so now on to the budget recommendations. First up is the FY20 salary analysis breakdown.
All right, so we're gonna jump into some salary discussion. This schedule looks super familiar to most of you. I've circled four cost categories. Working from the bottom up, I've circled school resource officer, which is an increase of $73,000. I've circled OPEB trust fund, which is an increase year over year of $250,000. And I've circled out of district tuition costs, which is an increase of just shy of $900,000. And then you see a little check next to each of those three categories, which denotes the fact that we've, discussed at length all of those things, right? So Stacy Busick, our Director of Student Services, came in and gave a very detailed presentation around out-of-district tuitions and, background and drivers around what's been included in our budget recommendation. I gave an extremely detailed presentation at the last meeting around our OPEB trust fund recommendation. And then we were fortunate enough to have both police chiefs attend the last meeting and give a detailed presentation and recommendation around the school resource officer. So that fourth circle, we haven't talked about necessarily in depth. We've talked about it, but not in depth. And so I felt the need to go into some additional level of detail behind that $674,000 increase associated with our salary account, which is our largest cost category in our budget. Represents nearly 2/3 of our costs. But before I go to the next slide, you know, note the note at the bottom. So the increases in just these four categories totals $1.89 million, or 87% of the total gross expense increase of $2.1 million. So it's these these four categories that are driving the majority of what we're seeing come through in that 6.2% net expense increase. If you can bounce to the next slide. So this slide drills down into our salary expense increase. So working from top to bottom. So as we've discussed earlier, all of our staff and COLA increases, as well as our steps that we've incorporated from a level service perspective, the gross amount derived from those calculations is just shy of $800,000 increase, $798,280. That's for all of our staff. 3 unions, administrative staff, everybody.
And what percent is that?
So we're gonna get there. So our teacher degree changes, in addition to that amount I've talked about for COLAs and steps, total a $92,463,000 increase. So those are the two cost increase drivers. Netted against that, to get to net salary increase costs, we've got a reduction of 1 elementary classroom teacher that we talked about in in the initial presentation in our key assumptions discussion, where we've got what we call a classroom bubble at the 5th grade level at one of our elementary schools. That grade will move on to the middle school level. The current 4th grade coming up to the 5th grade, there won't be a 7th class. There won't be a need for a 7th, 5th grade teacher. So we've built in a reduction of 1 FTE into our budget for that reason. And then the next line reflects anticipated staff retirements replacement savings. So what do I mean by that? So Mike and I have developed kind of a staffing replacement strategy in our staffing model, where we say, as a general guideline, when a staff retires or leaves the district on a voluntary basis, but primarily when they retire, they usually, if you think about our salary grid, they're at that bottom right-hand quadrant. So the most expensive of our staff, and for the right reasons, right? They're the most experienced, and they typically hold the highest degrees. So when they retire, and we apply our strategy, which is on average to replace at the midpoint, which we've targeted at Master's Step 5, which is around $60,000, a little bit less. So we've got 5 teachers that, as of the posting of this recommendation, had retired. And when you apply that replacement strategy calculation, it generates $157,611 in savings, which we factored into our budget recommendation. So we built in the ads, the COLAs, the steps, the teacher degree changes, and then we've backed out the reductions, that 1 FTE in the salaries, the replacement savings for retirees, the 5. That nets us a net increase in total salary costs of $674,591. So So we've got total district salaries in our budget recommendation of $21,492,585. The change is $674,591 for a all-in net percentage change of 3.24% for all of our staff, including all of the drivers, most of which are contractual, primarily step and degree changes. So degree changes, for those of you that aren't super familiar with our teacher's contract, there's a provision in the contract that says if you intend to change columns on the salary scale, basically earn an additional degree or further your education, right, in the form of a degree, you have to notify the superintendent prior to December 1st of the prior year. And the reason for that is so that we can do this, right, so that we can plan accordingly. So we had 22 teachers provide Mike and my office with notice, and the net effect of those 23 notices is the $92,463. So if we drill down into the drivers of the aggregate numbers, that $21 million, I didn't want to make the schedule too busy, so I said, okay, so let's look at the teacher-nurse combination, which is basically representative of our teacher contract. So if we look just at that, you've got a total teacher contract salary in our budget recommendation of $15 million, $16,061,089. Sorry.
You got it.
Everybody wants to do
Right, which is a change.
I like the first number better.
Right, of $580,580, or a 4.1% increase for just that pool of staff, which is a sub-pool of the 21 million that I talked about a little bit earlier.
Okay,
So basically, the net effect of COLAs, steps, degree changes, the in and outs of all the people, right, is a 4.1% increase for that group. Category of staff, okay? And then I kind of looked at some of the other categories and I said, okay, what's driving some of the numbers to be reduced significantly? And I wanted to call specifically out our teachers' assistants. We've got roughly 55 or so FTE teaching assistants across the district, mostly at the elementary level. And you can see that our budget reflects a decrease in the total cost, a reduction of about 2.37%, budget to budget. And the driver behind that is so the number of FTEs is the same, so no new staff, no new programs, but the mix of staff has changed from year to year, and we've reflected that in our budget. So, every year we have both voluntary and involuntary turnover, and this year, the folks that left, who were replaced, were at a lower cost. So that's basically what that says. And then I've got an all other category, which is kind of a catch-all for everything else, which includes administration, the business office, the IT folks, et cetera, everybody else. What's that? Custodians, maintenance, so on and so forth. Everybody else that's not either a teacher, a nurse, or a teaching assistant. And the aggregate of that pool, that subset, is a total salary cost, let me see if I can get this right, $5,051,611, which is an increase of $127,513, or 2.59% year over year. So that's a deeper dive look into our salary costs. Again, teachers and nurses, the teacher contract component is obviously the lion's share of what we're talking about here. And that 4.1%, it usually runs somewhere between 4 and 4.5% on a net basis year over year over year. absent any, major reductions in staff, rifts, and all that kind of stuff.
So the result of our 2.5% COLA increase is about 4.5% in salaries because
That's about
of
that's
steps
about the
and
normal
columns.
translation, yeah. Yeah, because you get the COLA, you get the steps, and then you get the degree changes, which are very unpredictable.
Now, are the nurses a part of the teacher's contract?
Yeah, yeah.
Just, it
There's
seems.
6 nurses.
Yep.
There's 5 head nurses and 1 part-time nurse.
It just looked like, so the Bucher nurse, the middle school and high school nurse have a huge jump in salary, and so I was just curious, they were around over 7%.
So you provided that question in your email. So
Yeah.
we've got 6 nurses. 4 of the 6 are scheduled to get both COLA and STEP. So nurses get STEP 2. So because they're getting COLAs and STEPs,
So
it
that's how you get the big
generates
jump?
an above average increase.
Okay.
It's contractual.
Well, and it also talks a little bit to the strategy that brings in the savings, also causes in future years step increases because those people will be progressing towards the higher end over time.
Yep.
But you have to
So-
constantly say, every time there's an open
Yeah.
position, how are we gonna get this back to, that Master's 5 step that we're looking at?
Right.
You have to commit to it and do it as, everywhere you can.
But it always doesn't work, right? I mean,
Right.
we
No,
all
it doesn't
know
always
Or it
work,
won't
yeah.
work.
That's the target on average, but we know that
There are some positions you
Some
can hire
positions-
easily
Some
and
are
some you can't.
really hard to find, yeah. An AP physics teacher, hard to find.
Exactly, exactly. So, we wouldn't be able to hire somebody at Master's 5 to teach physics. We just couldn't.
Right.
So that's a deeper dive into our salary costs and the drivers and the net impact for,
And- And so
our
this,
largest cost category.
so this also, that 4.5%, does that also include all of these extended, whatever they were called, extended duties and stuff like that?
Stipends.
Let me see if I included those or not in this analysis.
Or is that somewhere else?
You talk about stipends.
No, that includes everything.
Well, there was,
and stuff like
when
that.
you look
There
at
was
the
a
detailed
thing
budget,
that
there's
says-
lots of these, like,
Yeah.
extended duties.
It's everything?
And there's,
Yeah, that's
like,
it.
another one, I don't remember what they
It's
were
everything.
called.
It's everything.
Okay.
Yeah, they were called extended responsibilities.
So those are contractual, right? So they're outlined in the new contract that we reviewed and the committee
Yep.
signed. And so, as part of this year's process, because we were in the midst of a budget development and a contract negotiation, and I was involved in both, I took a very, very close look at the contract, and this year's budget reflects every single cost where there's a contractual obligation, including stipends.
Yep. And it's hard when you're looking at those contracts and trying to put a number of what percentages, you're looking at what we didn't have it until it comes into the budget, then you're like, oh, okay, that really affects the budget.
Yeah, well, I provided, if you recall, I provided a summary of contract-to-contract comparison, and I provided with a 3-page list of
The stipends.
the stipends that were changing and what the net effect was, but it wasn't a budget-to-contract analysis necessarily. So this budget recommendation includes all of the stipends that are in the current contract that are in, I think it's Appendix C, D, E, and F.
I have a question about the revenues that we already talked about. So some of our parents pay a cost of the out-of-district tuition with the district. Where does that come into the budget? Does it come in as an offset somewhere, or as a revenue?
Are you talking about settlements?
Yes.
So those are legal settlements, and the budgets only reflect the district's share of a settlement agreement. There's no revenue.
So their cost would go to that.
So when there's those settlements, they're paying that tuition directly to the out-of-district school?
Yeah, so hypothetically, right, so let's say
Right,
there's
I didn't understand that.
situation where there's a out-of-district placement that is $100,000, and there's a settlement agreement that's a 50-50 cost share, and to
Didn't find that.
oversimplify, the parents are gonna cover the full costs of the transportation. So what we would see in our operating budget is we would see our share of the settlement agreement,
Okay.
which is 50. We would see no direct operating costs in transportation, and we would never see, from a financial perspective,
Yep.
the 50 that the parents are paying,
Okay.
or the costs associated with the transportation of that student.
Yep. So if the parents didn't pay, it doesn't necessarily become incumbent upon the district to make up that cost or something?
No.
Because the
those
settlement
are-
agreement
those are
lays
signed
that out.
legal
Okay,
documents, yeah.
I understand that. Okay, thank you.
That's a
Yeah.
that's a contract.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just, yeah.
All right, any other questions on the salary breakdown? Thank you, Jeff, for doing that. That's actually
So,
really great.
why don't we bounce ahead a couple of slides? Why don't we go to the things not included?
Yep.
So Mike's gonna cover that, and while he's
Went too
prepping
far.
the slide, so part of the process, if you think about our process slides, in the November timeframe, I kick off the budget process with memos and tools and all those kinds of things. And one of the things that I ask for feedback from our leadership team is input on new costs in one of 4 categories. So I ask, because we always start with level service as kind of the jumping off point. So we ask for feedback around new faculty positions, including stipends. We ask for feedback around new administrative and support positions. We ask for feedback on new programs, new instructional program costs. And then I asked for specific feedback around one-time extraordinary expense items that can take multiple forms and sometimes take the form of a project, a capital project that meets the definition of capital projects that might find its way onto the capital project list down the road. So we track that information pretty closely, and we've always, as part of the budget process, been transparent with the committee and with the community around the things that our leadership team has asked for, but have not been included in our operating budget recommendation. Go for it, Mike.
So, to kind of review these, so you're looking at category 1 is our faculty positions that were requested. First one there is increasing our shared specialists from 0.7 to 0.8. Those are the art, music, and phys ed teachers that are part-time at the elementary. Right now, because they are our 0.7 positions, they don't work on Wednesdays, and that prevents them from attending our staff development programming. So there's a request from our elementary principals to increase them to a 0.8 so that they could actually take part in our PD. At the middle school, we've talked about this one in past years, about having, looking for adding more STEM offerings at the middle school and, adding a coding and robotics teacher position. The math department has requested a new position to institute a computer science program. We're looking at, the high school has also asked for a skills-based health teacher, and that's to improve our offerings on health and educating students about risky behaviors like the opioid use, suicide, depression, marijuana, sexuality, and nutrition. Vaping, absolutely, would be part of that. Student Services has requested an additional clinical psychologist. Again, district position to provide social and emotional, behavioral, and mental health. As we've talked about, the number of students who are experiencing some severe mental health issues that, it was a position that Stacey Busick had put in for. Increasing the middle school language-based ELA program from 0.5 to 0.8. That's something we're going to have to consider as time goes on because of our expected increase in the number of students in our language-based programs at the middle school. Then we had a series of coaches here, a varsity assistant for football, hockey, basketball, boys and girls basketball, track and field. The last one, category 3 varsity assistants, was actually 14 different assistant coaching positions. This was all in there last year as well. And then we have additional healthcare costs for that for the 4 new staff that are proposed up above.
How many of these varsity assistants are actually working for us because they're being paid for by boosters?
How many right now?
There's been upwards of 9, I believe, on an annual basis that have been funded through boosters and all those kinds of things.
Okay, administrative support positions. There's a request that we've had before, the 6 teaching assistants for the kindergarten program. Also have requests in special ed from teaching assistants at the Cutler, 1.5 FTEs at the Winthrop, and then 2 other special ed TA positions district-wide across the district. And again, healthcare for those positions that were actually totals 11. And again, those are things that we've also had on this list in the past.
So this clinical psychologist,
Mhm.
so if we don't have this person, are we paying for contracted services?
In some cases, we are, but it's right now, we did, how many years ago was that? Was it 3, 4?
3 years ago, we
We
reorganized our
psychs.
psychology department.
And wound up reducing staff in that process. And, as we're seeing an increase in testing and number of students who are on IEPs, the demand has actually, kind of gone up in the meantime, so.
And how many do we have? Do we have any?
Oh, yeah.
We have 3
3.
psychologists. We had 4.
Right.
One left, a voluntary term, and we didn't replace that person.
Okay, so, but we are paying for contracted services of some amount.
I've seen it in
I
the
would expect so,
warrants.
yeah. I think
Okay.
And how much are we paying now for contracted services?
Oh,
for-
I have no idea what we're paying
For
as it
psych.
relates specifically to this issue.
Yeah, but I'd have to ask Stacy exactly what we're paying in that.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know, like, how much
I don't believe it's 600,000,
less
but
it is. I would
it's-
assume it's
it's
quite a
less
bit.
than
And
the
then,
cost of
is
a
this a testing psychologist, or is this like a mental health psychologist?
Both.
So, didn't we at one point have a grant for something like this?
Still do have a social worker at the high school that's grant funded, but,
Okay, so that's what I was confused with, okay.
but not a psych. So hold on, I'm just making myself a note.
And these kindergarten teaching assistants, don't we have part-time ones that are grant funded?
Right now, we're funding them through Title I. Hopefully that money continues, there's no guarantees.
But just to be clear, we're funding 6 part-time.
Part-time.
Yeah, part-time, yeah.
Part-time kindergarten teaching assistants.
And then, category
Question,
3.
if we've hired 6 part-time, that's 1, it's 2 in each building?
Yes. Yes. Okay, new program, instructional programming requests. Again, if, robotics and coding materials to go along with the position that we talked about earlier. As we've upgraded our materials in mathematics from kindergarten through grade 8. Now we're starting to look at, how that's going to impact the high school mathematics program, and so there's a request there for math textbooks. There's also a request from the high school principal for an after-school academic support program for students who are struggling. It's definitely a need there, I think. Then we also have requests in student services for assistive technology equipment. Most of that is iPad replacements, and then a subscription for and then money for a subscription service. Special education curriculum tools to support the language-based program at all 3 levels. And let's see, and then special ed summer contracted services, and it's summer services for students requiring wraparound services and extended day programming that goes on through the summer. And then the last category there, we
So
have.
if the student's IEP requires this assistive technology, what are we gonna do about it?
We're actually, we have places, it's actually replacements for equipment that is currently in place.
Oh, okay, so like aging equipment.
Right.
Okay.
So there's, looks like 17 iPads that we're using right now for assistive tech that are due for an upgrade.
And this curriculum is what?
So it's for the language-based learning disabilities program.
So like a read, write, or something? Or-
Right.
Okay. Or what is that?
There was a
Thing called,
Language
Lexicale
Live.
or something, okay.
Is one of the programs listed here.
So that's not needed in order to operate the program?
We're making do with what we have right now, but this will be an upgrade of of the curriculum materials.
Okay.
And then category 4 is extraordinary one-time costs. We're placing an iPad cart at the middle school, performing arts rooms, doing some renovation work. One of the pieces that we're looking at is removing the, if you've been into the middle school band room, you know that there's those risers that are built into the room. Kind of restricts how that room is used, and it's a big space, and so one of the questions is, can we take those out and actually open up some flexibility in the room? And then
I like those.
projection screen system would go along with that as well. Question right now we're having discussions about is that we've instituted the one-to-one program at the high school, and now is there a natural progression of that program into the middle school, and so there's it's a TBD right now, and so the question about costs to consider, including devices, professional development, and any administrative costs there. Looking at K to, as I said, we've upgraded all of our math curriculum resources, K to 8. We've upgraded our science resources, K to 8, and now we're looking at English language arts, and so there's a request there, unfunded request for curriculum resources for English language arts. That includes also new books for classroom libraries and a handwriting without tears program. So that's all really wrapped around the upgrades to ELA that we're considering at this point in time.
So would we expect to see those in the budget next year?
I would think so, yes.
It's a question of affordability.
It's a question of, would we put them in there next year, depending on what the whole budget looks like. But I would advocate for them. And then athletics, some of the large netting on the back fields is due for replacement. There's also a line item here for resodding the athletic fields at the high school. And then 2 other pieces of expanding the health classroom, which would take down some walls to make the health classroom larger, and then doing some work to create a yoga and Pilates room. Those of you know, yoga and Pilates is a huge program going on at the high school right now, and it's done right now in the open gym. It's not really a great place for relaxing, meditative, contemplative things when the middle school gym is going on right next to you.
Balls of fire
So,
at
yeah,
you.
exactly.
She does have a nice little thing.
Yeah, she had a fern. Yeah, it was nice.
Nice.
So that was the question is, could we do some work there to create that quiet space to do, that would be more conducive to that. So those are the 4 categories of things that, we'd like to do, but we aren't able to do at this point in time.
So how does this tie back into the process? So as you think about the process and the process flows, we developed the budget in that November, December timeframe before the presentation to the school committee on the 19th. We developed that level service budget, right? And then we layered in our OPEB recommendation. Then we layered in the school resource officer recommendation. And then I'm working concurrently with the Director of Student Services to provide a detailed and, descriptive budget recommendation from her perspective around out-of-district tuitions, right? And when those came through and we put it all together and it yielded 6.2%, that's when
we felt we were done.
That's when, we stopped.
Right.
Right? So, unlike last year, if you think about last year's process, it was level service plus a number of critical priorities. That included, for example, an investment in and math resources, right? So, and we're appreciative for that, and that's going great. But Mike and I didn't feel as though that, although many of these things have merit and are very important and critical to our long-term plan, that, you know, at 6.2%, we didn't feel that it was right for us to include these things in the budget recommendation. But at the same time, we felt that it was appropriate and transparent to provide this conversation. So the total, it's $1.2 million worth of additional funds.
1.2 plus, right? 'Cause there's like 3 or 4 things on here that are to be determined.
Yeah, there's a few that are TBDs.
Yeah. So any questions about what's not included?
This psychologist sticks out to me. You know, it's something that I know has been mentioned a few times along the way. You know, and really just sort of going all the way back to, is it Kristen? Lazaros.
David, could you speak up just a little?
Yeah, sure.
Lazaro.
So,
Sorry.
Kristen
Kristen
Lazaro's
Lazaro,
presentation to us last December, excuse me, and just the, you know, number of students sort of with, you know, identifying as having, you know, anxiety, increased anxiety in the school, that I really think that, you know, this psychologist is you know, pretty important. I think it's sort of some of the hiring that we almost can't do enough of at the moment. So, I mean, that's the thing that really sticks out most to me. And I don't know where anyone else sort of sits on that.
One thing that's not on this list that we talked about in last year's budget was when there was a reduction in user fees, that was only for one type of activity, which was sports. And we know that kids participate in many extracurricular activities, which we are not supporting really at all, other than maybe their stipend. And, you know, if 1/4 at the middle school is participating in the musical, but we don't really support that, we have a high user fee for that, or we have kids, you know, who are going to this DECA thing, that's a pretty, I'm paying more for one thing at DECA than I'm paying for an entire season of swimming. I'm paying double what I'm paying for one DECA competition than what I'm paying for an entire season of swimming. And I get that some of that is hotel, I get that, but it just doesn't seem like, it seems like all of our user fee reduction went only to one category of people, and it was to high school athletes, and it was not equitably distributed. And I'm wondering what we can do about, even if it means we have to raise user fees to be more equitable in our decision-making, to make sure that we're getting all of the students in all of the grades who are paying these fees.
Yeah, because extracurricular really adds up, especially I've noticed for DECA in particular. Just to go to states is way more than one sport user fee.
Well,
And some of it's
keep in mind that we're actually looking at administrative requests right here.
No, I'm just saying, but
I'm
that's
just saying, we talked about it
not
last.
been in the budget
Last
discussion so far,
budget.
and we did talk about addressing
budget
it in
we
the last
said-
budget, so we just want to be sure that that discussion doesn't not happen. Because that was something that when people came and spoke to us, we promised them that we would look at this year, and thus far, we haven't looked at it.
It's not in our budget recommendation.
Correct.
That's correct, I know that, yeah.
And
So-
while it's 6.2%, I would love to be looking at it, because I'm one of those kids that didn't participate in sports, because I'm as coordinated, I am as uncoordinated as they come. But at 6.2%, there's got to be a limit to how much, you know, we ask, how much we ask of the town as we're trying to be equitable.
I was asking if we could redistribute the funds so that the reduction in the user fee was not as great it would be redistributed more equitably across all extracurricular activities, instead of being dedicated to only one type of extracurricular activity. So I would be interested in knowing what that would look like. And I don't even, I mean, personally, my kids aren't really participating in a lot of things, so I don't really know what a lot of things cost, but I would be interested in knowing that, and if we can somehow find a way to be more equitable about our distribution. Especially where those things are academic.
It's never been in the operating budget.
So.
I've never been involved in it. Is it something we can do down the road? For sure. Yeah. It would be a very extensive and involved process. I mean, there's no baseline to work from.
It was something we had talked about last year. We made a promise. I think we are obligated to discuss it.
So, like a lot of the arts programs are obviously subsidized. The DECA program subsidized as well?
So the DECA program's brand new? No, no.
Yeah, there's
it's not,
nothing?
no. If it's not in the operating budget, it's not subsidized.
Right. Well, there's a stipend. I mean, you could argue that the stipend is a...
Stipend subsidized, sure.
Subsidizing
Some
the program.
Some might be.
Yeah.
There's gate revenue, there's ticket sales, that's the district treasurer's kind of space, not mine. When it's not in the operating budget, it's not something that, up until this point, it's been kind of under my purview.
And we've got the Friends of the Arts, right?
They
So it's
came
like...
the last 2 years asking for some.
Yeah, but we have like Friends of the Arts. I mean, I don't really think we want to be encouraging like Friends of the Model UN, Friends of DECA, Friends of the Language Club, Friends of the Robotics Club. I think we want to, that's getting to the point where we may as well just have a private school and just everybody privately fundraise for everything we want. I think we need to just think about strategically how we spend our money equitably on those things.
Anything else on administrator requests not included in the recommendation?
Excuse me. All right. Thanks for putting that together for us, Jeff and Mike. Up next is the capital projects prioritization.
So I'll go over the key assumptions of the project list, and then I'll hand it off to you guys to kind of go from there. So, our capital project list is constantly being reviewed and updated. It covers, it's a kind of a long-term lookout, spanning 4 or 5 years. The scope typically covers projects that fall into several categories, including facilities and grounds, technology, food service, athletics, and master planning. What qualifies as a capital item? So we've developed this this definition: tangible assets that cost at least $10,000 and have a useful life of at least 5 years. And then funding sources. So if you think about the list, we've identified 4 items that total $122,186. And we've recommended those to be funded through our operating budget. The rest, which is over $20 million worth of projects, are on the list. They haven't been prioritized for this year, and we haven't identified necessarily a funding source, but potential funding sources could be, debt exclusions, grants, donations, as well as the district's operating budget if we chose to, leverage that in future years to increase, funding. What we talked about last year in that space was historic. 2 years ago, we had a little over $300,000 worth of capital projects in our operating budget. Last year, that was reduced to $130,000. And this year, because of what I just described, these other increases, particularly in salary costs, out-of-district tuitions, OPEB, and the new SRO recommendation, we're north of a 6% increase. So we felt, we felt as if it wasn't the appropriate time to increase our capital funding component of our operating budget above, where we were last year. So it's, marginally less at $122,000. So So that's kind of the key assumptions in the background. Mike, I don't know who wants to take the conversation from here. I don't know if the subcommittee is prepared to make a recommendation around what they're planning to do, or the full committee to have some conversation and provide some guidance to administration around next steps.
The subcommittee had a conversation directly before this meeting about the items we were talking about the items on this year's list. We had some questions. Mike was.
Yeah, we had some questions, and we had gone through the list of what we thought was a priority. Some of them we were trying to see if can get funding through a grant, such as the building energy management system, HVAC. And we had gone through a list and narrowed down some of the items that had been in the orange, and to see what to include and what not to include. And we couldn't give a full recommendation because we did not have an update on Longmeadow. So that's something that would have to be under the full committee to hear that in executive session.
We've been
And so,
quite heavily balancing all of our priorities, Longmeadow, as well as these
Yeah.
capital items and a couple of things.
and one thing we talked about was, we really thought it was important, just kind of with the vision, we were talking about it, so we didn't make a full recommendation, was, you know, putting together a strategic planning group so we understood everything and, you know, having buy-in from everybody as far as the town's administration, students, citizens, just putting some kind of group together to talk about, you know, our strategic plan.
I believe that if we're gonna do the Longmeadow thing, a street, and the new elementary school, a strategic plan is a good idea. You know, we had one building the middle school, and, I believe if we're gonna do this, you know, that would be a useful endeavor. As for ongoing capital items, I'm sure this committee will continue to look at this list and keep discussing its potential. But as for a recommendation, we would greatly appreciate a Longmeadow update before we get one.
I thought we were going to resurrect the other list that talked about safety
And that's what was on here.
It's in the packet.
And so we went
Okay,
through
so I
the,
could-
Page
so
before.
we went through
See
the
that.
list and kind of cut down, when we discussed it with Mike.
Page 30.
And we did cut down a couple of items, and so what the total,
where's the thing
couple
that says
of
safety
Um,
and
d-
critical
Far
infrastructure?
left.
and-
so,
Oh, I see how it's cross-referenced now.
so we basically went through the
Thank you.
critical and infrastructure, handicap accessibility type things. And there was a couple things we thought could get funding from other areas? And, you know, if we could, then we can knock down that to be around 1.839792 when looking at it. And that's what our list comes to, and didn't have time to type anything up as we met right before this meeting.
Jeff, can we work under the assumption that a lot of these safety, I'm sorry, I forget what it's called, but anything on here is really, like, it has already been looked at, that it's something that we couldn't already have done with a grant, or that's something that would have to move forward?
The only thing on this list that, again, go back to the key assumptions, right? So I've made no assumptions
Yep.
around
Funding,
funding sources.
right.
So, the only project on this list that I could foresee being potentially funded under a grant is the building energy management system, and that would be a continuation of the building automation system upgrade project.
Okay.
That was a Green Communities grant project, and I sent you an update on that earlier this week.
And that's what we had
About the roof.
said on here.
But that's complicated because the
Towns
towns
have to say
are
yes.
our applicants. They're the participants in the green communities, not the district.
Right.
So we would I would need to have those conversations with, you know, with Peter and with Joe and with others to see if they would be willing. I'm not familiar enough with their list to know if they have projects that they have lined up to go into the Green Communities Grant project pipeline.
And that
So
was exactly our question.
So I'm waiting to get some direction from the committee around projects, because there's only so much capacity in my office to manage large-scale projects.
And that's
before
what
I
our
have that
question was,
with the
and
towns.
was, you know, could we fund that with a grant, that
was
one
the-
item?
That was the question. Could we?
Okay, so that was
I
also.
don't know if we could or we couldn't.
So
I think
that's
you
the
would.
addition of everything that was carried over from the debt exclusion,
And no,
right?
it's kind of, sort of, do you have the list in front of you?
Yeah, I have the list in front of me.
There were some cosmetic things that we thought.
That we
could-
took out, that we had
thought
taken
could be
out.
pushed a year. There were, I mean, granted, would all like to do this stuff now. I mean, we put it forward last year, and we all think that it's.
We didn't put the cosmetic
Not the
items
cosmetic
forward last
stuff.
We
year.
took the
but
cosmetic stuff out
the,
of it.
What we call cosmetic infrastructure.
And then.
I mean, I can go over each item that we decide to keep in, if that's what you would like.
So,
Can
wait
I-
a minute, so the things that, well, go ahead.
So what I'm hearing though is that we're just itemizing the lists. And what I'm not hearing though is if the subcommittee is going to recommend that we put forth a capital plan that includes.
We
Like-
did not do a recommendation because we did not have all the information we needed to get
We
to
were-
that conclusion.
We were
And, you know, we also
trying
need
to be-
information on, haven't had any update on Long Meadow, and so we're waiting for an executive session to get an update and then discuss the, you know, the two items. We had just, our priority was to go through the five-year capital plan, since we only had a short time to meet, and trying to get information with not a lot of information.
We're trying to be sensitive to the towns and proposed to the proposed Long Meadow. We know that that is a thing. We know that it is moving forward. We also know that we can't talk about it outside of an executive session. And so while we have a recommendation on capital items, it becomes more complicated by Long Meadow. The committee is pretty much, had this discussion of where we should be going, but whether or not we go forward
And that's
has a
one thing we
lot to do
felt.
with Long Meadow, and
And
because
it's
we're
really
trying to
important
be.
to have a strategic planning group too,
So
is
we're
to try and
trying
help
to,
organize
you know,
this.
not
So
overload the
to
towns.
sort of expedite this conversation a little, what I'm hearing is that you'd like more information, more time to actually compile this list, and everything is actually based off of any movements with Long Meadow.
Yes, we have the
Okay.
list, it's just
So
that
I
Long
think
Meadow's
we
And
the.
more
sort of go
in-depth on
through
some
with
of
that
these
as being
projects.
the recommendation, on really looking at this and getting questions answered, and then, coming back after our next executive session regarding Long Meadow to actually put anything forward at that, rather than to sort of be talking in circles about recategorizing this and
Well,
listing
part of it too
priorities.
is our recommendation is to get together a strategic planning
So,
group,
okay,
because
well, that'd
that
be-
helps
but-
to
but-
put
but
everything
putting
into
together a
perspective.
strategic- But to put together an entire new board would not allow any recommendations on what should be moving forward in this year's budget cycle, or anything that has to go to town meeting. The time involved in
Correct.
actually taking that.
Correct.
So that's why I'm saying that we're gonna move forward with this, and the recommendation would be based off of, after our next executive session regarding Long Meadow, if we would
Yes.
have anything moving
Once
So we
forward.
need
have
executive session, then we need to
session, we will
meet,
have-
so we need to then discuss the
We will have
information.
a recommendation
What
for
about
you.
phasing
Okay.
in the furniture rather
So,
than?
That doesn't.
is everyone satisfied with?
Stacy, can,
I'm
since you're.
trying to
you have the
understand the
list, can
timing,
you-
though.
So,
Go ahead.
so what I'm trying to figure out is this timing does not look like anything from this list is going to make it into this budget cycle.
We don't know that.
That's what I'm,
So, well,
that's
we're-
what
we're
I'm
running out of
hearing
time
from
in
the
this
way
budget
We are
cycle.
running
that
out of time.
timing is
That's kind
sounding,
of the point.
yes.
When are we going to have an update? When do we have that planned?
So there's a lot of moving parts.
Right.
And
Right.
this-
Exactly.
And we didn't get a direction from the committee until December 19th around Longmeadow. And then we went into the holiday cycle, and we lost 2 weeks there.
We've been
No
working
one was
since.
available. We've been working very diligently, but there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of legal elements to this thing.
Yep.
And I assure you that we're working very hard and as fast as we can with all the players, but
Is that February 13th date, the date we would need to?
You would need to vote by then, yeah.
yeah. So
So,
we're not,
Stacy,
we're
can
not
you-
committing to, but we're looking to hopefully have an executive session on January 30th.
That would be good.
And are we
because
going to have a budget workshop too scheduled?
That was gonna come up
Okay.
later.
I think, David, we can have your answer after that executive session. We have the list, we just finished putting it
No,
together.
we need to meet though after
But we
that
need to
executive
meet-
session, so.
We need to meet after that executive session and have a conversation around that, because that will determine the recommendation we give. And there are a lot of moving pieces to that, but, I believe that after the executive session, we will have a better understanding. I would imagine there's a meeting the first week in February, or is the
February
13th the
February
first one?
13th is the first one.
Yeah,
January
we have the
30th
30th
and
and
then
the
February
13th.
If the executive session's on the 30th, we can have a recommendation for the 13th, easily.
Wait.
If we have an
Just-
executive session on the 30th, I'm sure the three of us could find enough time inside
we'd have
2
to
weeks
vote in as a
to
committee,
have
right?
something for
the
them on the
3 of you
13th.
and Mike and Jeff, and
That's
you'd probably want to post that meeting before we have the executive session, so you have.
no.
Yeah,
Calendar.
right now, it's getting hard to get information going back and forth, so I don't know about that.
Okay. So I had sent some questions, for the, what do you call it, budget workshop thing, so we're gonna talk about those next week, is that what that's gonna be, or?
So the email that got the response on today,
I don't know anything about that.
so, yeah, there was a response.
Jeff responded to your
Very long
questions
response.
via
I
email.
spent 7 hours preparing a written response.
So,
Okay, well, I work, and I literally came straight from work to here, so I don't know what any of that said, so.
It's in your inbox.
Okay, all those questions are
Okay.
actually,
Stacy also sent an
So-
email, and I'll have a written response to all those questions by
All right.
Friday at the latest.
So the number of the amount that we're spending on retiree post-employment benefits was how much?
So I responded to your questions. You had, I don't know, several pages of questions.
Yep.
But the bottom section was directed at the, I think you called it, questions specific to this year's budget.
Yep.
It's those questions that I responded to. The other questions I've left for either the committee or a workshop group.
So is it possible someone could look that up, since I don't have a computer, I don't have the ability to read it, I'm not an employee, I don't work all day and read my email from the school committee, so I don't know the answers.
Here's the email, if you wanna look, here's a response.
I don't know what she's freaking about it either.
all right, so we're done with the capital project prioritization.
Okay, so the answer is no, we're not going through these questions. I'm supposed to read these later. Is that,
Well, we can.
Well, this is in a.
The plan was not to go through the responses. I responded to your email in writing, and I copied the committee.
okay, so do we think any of the people in the audience here would be interested in knowing any of these things?
If you want to put it on the future agenda item, I'm happy to go over it.
Okay. I would like to put this on a future agenda item for a budget workshop meeting next week.
So Okay, we'll talk about that
Okay.
over at topics in the next meeting. Moving on to the Cutler and Winthrop SOI submissions. We heard back from Cutler that, we did not make the final cut this year, but they recommended us actually resubmitting an SOI, and also during the process, submitting an SOI for the Winthrop School as well.
I know.
Okay.
Um,
So I just wanted to get the will of the committee. Is that something you would like me to spend my time on? The Cutler one can get resubmitted as is, but would you like me to work on the Winthrop one?
On the question about the Cutler SOI, were we missing any information
No.
on it that we could add to help?
Well, and
They felt it was fully complete. They came and did a site visit.
Yep.
They asked lots of questions. I think,
so what I recall from your report of that meeting was that they encouraged you to put in the
That's
SOI
correct,
for
for
Winthrop. So I would think that they are more expert on whether or not we have a good chance than me. So to me, it seems like we should do that, especially because it does sound like that's possibly a direction we're moving.
Right.
right.
No, and just, to sort of clarify with the Cutler project, we made it, far into the
Yeah.
process. Just at the end of the day, there's only so much money to give.
Right.
And,
Yeah, I just wanted to
when
make
we
sure
were on the priority list, we were just.
There's-
We're
so
probably
at
gonna have to
the
go
cutoff
year
line.
after year doing that.
There's an April 12th, the window
Yeah.
closes the April 12th. I just wanted to make sure I'm, to plan my time out to get that, to hit that deadline, because you do have to vote before that submission. The committee has to vote to submit. So I
So
wanted to
Cutler,
make
they
sure.
say, is changing the dates,
Cutler's
right?
changing the
And-
dates.
and
That's
then
what she told me.
Winthrop
It's
is gonna
actually,
be its own
it's actually
animal.
clicking a few buttons on the website. It just resubmits. But then,
Funny
which is
question.
beautiful.
Right.
Winthrop, I still have my notes from last year, so I can put one together, but I just wanted to make sure that was what,
Yeah.
you guys wanted me to do that
Do-
before I started
Put
doing
a
it.
new school at Winthrop? I mean, is that?
No,
That's-
the idea would be consolidate.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so that's
So,
what it is.
so in order to
So
consolidate,
then
they were
if you put
talking
them
about putting
in, then you're
both in.
sorta- They're looking at both and being like,
Right.
Right.
you know what I mean? Sort of
Okay,
helps our
okay.
chances a little.
Well, it's like the Ips, not to jinx it, but it's sort of like the Ipswich thing, where they put in one for both, and then they had to decide, are they gonna do both, or consolidate, or
So-
really just lose their place in line and do nothing,
Right.
But they did.
which is what they did.
Will they, okay, I'm sure I've asked this question before, but I'm tired. Will they help us, is the MSBA build stuff, they're not interested in helping us acquire land, are they?
They would, if you needed it,
They would, yeah.
Spend my time on it. Yes.
but it won't come in at the right time.
Right, that would definitely be a timing issue,
Ah,
So,
thank you.
to have the building authority assist with any land purchase.
yeah, I don't know what they do in that
Right.
regards. As far as I've seen, it's just been buildings that they
Right.
pay for.
So theoretically, they could, but again, that.
Yeah, don't do land. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
No?
Building.
It's building.
It's vertical construction. So you need guidance or you need a motion?
I don't think I need a vote at this point. I just want to make sure, I wanted to make sure before I started that everybody was, if I show up on April 12th with 2 submissions, it wasn't going to be, no, we're not doing
I
this.
think you did a
So,
vote last year.
I think we
I'm
did.
We did a vote last
did a
year.
vote.
So
Yeah.
go ahead if you like, if it
Yeah,
makes everybody feel better.
Just to.
I move that the Hamilton Wyndham Regional School Committee direct Mike Harvey and/or Jeff Sands to move forward with an SOI for both Winthrop and Cutler.
Great.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous? Excellent. All right, now up next is update on school committee goals. Exhibit H, where is that? Oh, that's why it's in here. Yeah. Is there such thing as a quick question regarding budget?
Jeff will knock it out of the park. It's on the slide number 28, district totals. And I thought it might have been asked, but you went from salary expenses over to the administrative asks that weren't included in the budget. So it just relates to The decrease in debt service expenses, of course, I think that's the middle school, right? And so that obviously reduced by 1.7 million thereabouts. And so how does that tie in with, obviously, the debt service reimbursement, MSBA? Can you just give a little bit of, like, education for me on how that works?
Yeah, so the top line, the debt service expense line in the top category.
Yep.
Is the line where we capture the costs of all of our debt service, including the costs associated with the high school, middle school projects.
Right.
Which was, let's call it $1.9 million in round numbers.
Sure.
Historically, right? So the final payment on that debt will be paid in May of 2019, which is FY19. So it rolls off the books in FY20.
Yep.
So that's what's driving that big negative number.
Right.
Right? So offsetting that number to a much lesser extent is the band financing and principal and interest associated with the 7-year band plan for the Winthrop Sprinkler project, right? It's about 157K, right?
Got it.
So those two things are embedded in that top line. So let's go to the next section, right? So the MSBA debt service reimbursement, that was 1.1 million and change.
Yep.
So that was associated with the high school, middle school project and the debt service that's expiring in FY19. So it rolls off the books too in FY20.
Exactly.
There's
But
your
there's,
story.
and so there's a difference of like 600,000 roughly
Right.
between the amount that rolls off.
The difference
That's what I was
between,
talking
so
about.
if we're looking at the high school, middle school project in isolation, it's $711,000.
The difference.
The difference.
Got it. That explains
Right?
it.
So that rolls off, 157 rolls on.
Yep.
20 years ago, when this project was done, the MSBA did their reimbursements annually. That changed, in the last decade or so. So now when we do a project and it's
Yep.
MSBA reimbursable, we get the money up front.
Real time.
It's the whole thing up front. What they did 20 years ago was said, okay, you guys are gonna make your annual debt service payment, and we're gonna give you, whatever that number was, $1.1 million
1.13, yeah.
every year to offset what you're paying towards the bonding.
Right.
So the expense rolls off, the reimbursement rolls off.
Right.
Yep.
It's all gone.
Yep.
Together.
Yeah, and you explained the difference, which is what I was most curious about. Thank you.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks,
No
Alex.
problem.
All right, I lost myself again. School committee goals. Advocate for a budget that calls for educational excellence while being mindful of the fiscal constraints of the communities. So, obviously, we're in the middle of that process right now. We're still putting forth a level service budget, which I will go on the record once again as saying is not the way to create and build an optimal school system. But in doing that, I think it just points out that we are being mindful of the fiscal constraints of the communities. And yeah, I don't know. What I get to say about that. I don't know if anyone else has any other input.
I think we need to hear a little bit more about what the community's fiscal constraints are so that we can understand them. So hopefully we'll be hearing from them soon.
So, yeah, if we have, when's our next?
Was that February? I don't know.
Before that, it's like the 6th.
The 4th or 5th?
5th,
The
I
5th,
think.
I think.
It is, let me just check. February 5th is our next joint finance meeting.
All right. The next step on our list, we have reprioritized the capital plans and development implementation strategy. We just went over that. It's definitely still a work in progress, and I think we'll continue to be, but it seems that we're on the right road about getting where we need to be or where we ideally want to be. So we're definitely making some progress there. Monitor the Cutler SOI process and act. Wow, it's like actually we're just everything we've been just going through in this agenda. SOI process and act is information is revealed. Information was revealed, and we're moving forward to resubmit an SOI for Cutler and for the Winthrop So, communication goals, more active outreach to our legislators regarding our district needs, more communication with town committees, the BOS and the FinCom. I know Jean, Mike, and myself have been meeting with various members at different times of the other committees. You know, obviously there's still plenty of time to go and meet further. Always happy to go for a cup of coffee. You know where to meet me.
Well, we know you go to Starbucks.
So that's what I'm saying. So
I drag you
before I
He's
met
an
up with Alex.
advertisement for Starbucks.
And always brand out. You notice that.
Carrie's Dunkin' Donuts.
So
You should support local business.
So-
Dunkin' Donuts and Honeycomb.
Right.
Starbucks.
Dunkin' Donuts. Ew.
That.
Ew. Anyway, so you know, obviously, you know, we really wanted to make it a goal as the community, as a committee, and you know, me personally, to be working a lot more hand in hand. So the numbers that really come out of these meetings are shocking. I mean, I guess in some ways, you know, they're always shocking, right? There never seems to be something falling off the map, and us sort of having, you know, no increase or money coming back. But you know, the more we could stay in touch and really just stay, at least try to stay on the same page. You know, always happy to meet with anybody at any time. So, excuse me, and I encourage everyone else to do so too, because actually just getting to meet the other committees is members of the other committees is quite rewarding in its own right. And working collaboratively with the MASC to fully convert and implement the online school committee policy manual. So
Has that started, or where are
Yep.
we at with that?
Yep. They have, Mike provided them with the, what do you call it, documents that they needed. They've gone through them, and now Dorothy Presser is just waiting on us to get back to her on some dates that we would be available.
very cool.
So as soon as Jean and Carrie, Mike, and myself can select a date, then we can move forward with that.
Oh, excellent. I mean, times, it seems like we've, you know, had a kind of a rough year. It's been a long year already, it seems. But we're actually making really good progress on our goals, so everyone's to be commended on that. Excuse me. Anyone else anything to say about that? I guess we can move on to donations. Exhibit I. The Friends of the Arts in the town of Wenham.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee accept $264 from the Hamilton Wenham Friends of the Arts for a contribution for the Hamilton Wenham Gives Back posters.
Second?
All those in favor? Thank you very much to Friends of the Arts.
Yes, thank you. I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee accept the donation of $500 from the town of Wenham for the high school band marching in the 375th anniversary parade.
So is that going into some sort of an activity account, or is that going into the general fund?
That's a,
This is coming from the town of Wenham, right?
I'd have to ask Don.
It's a
Where's it
donation
going
to
to?
us. Is it going into an activity account, or is it going into the general fund?
I'd have to ask Don, I'm not sure.
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you, Carrie.
So, 6. Opposed? Abstaining? So, 1 abstention. Thank you to the town of Wenham supporting our band. So up next is establishment of a scholarship, Adam Snavely, MD Memorial Scholarship.
Do you have more information, Mike, on this?
It's actually on page 62.
Yeah, I see. I was just wondering.
So
He died.
Dr.
was a young man.
Snavely's, I believe it's his children. No, he was a valedictorian. Sorry, remembered by his parents, Daniel and Lindsay, brother Evan, and many other family, friends, and colleagues in Hamilton, Wenham, and beyond. So Dr. Snavely was the valedictorian of the class of 2001. the family has endowed a scholarship in the amount of $153,000. And that will be
I didn't understand.
presented in $3,000 increments every year. As I said, to honor the memory of Adam, the scholarship is given to a senior who demonstrates academic achievement, financial need, and a passion to help others.
Very cool.
Oh, that's an incredible gift.
All right, I didn't understand that from this. I was thinking
Yeah,
that
it's-
it was endowed with $3,000,
No.
and then I was
Yeah,
like,
that's
how
what
are we
I was
going to be
No,
giving
I had to go
3,000?
back and look it up and to make sure I had the right amount. It's $153,000 is what was donated, was
that's an
deposited with the school district to fund this scholarship.
That's an amazing
Okay.
contribution.
So we need
okay.
to accept that, right?
It's a lot of money,
And approve
exactly.
the scholarship.
Yes.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee accept and the scholarship for the, establishment of a scholarship for the Adam Snavely Medical, MD Memorial Scholarship in the amount of $153,000.
Second.
All those in favor? So, that's an incredible gift. Thank you
Was
so
great.
much.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you
a great
so
gift,
much.
by
That is
Great legacy.
amazing.
All right,
And
now.
our sympathies to the
Yes.
family.
Yes.
I'm sorry. So, sorry. Committee reports, policy legislative, I guess we just got your update. Anything else you want to add?
No, that's all there is to add, other than the fact that I think Carrie, right? Carrie, I think there is probably more we could be doing around showing our support for the, funding proposal that the MASC has. Like, people are passing resolutions and people are writing letters, and we're not doing any of that yet, so.
Yeah, we
So
need to
do
get a
we-
little bit more actively active.
So we might want to be looking at that at our next meeting.
Hey, the best thing to do is to go the day to the Hill and, advocate directly at people for things that,
I'm not
that
sure
budget
what
is-
that date is yet, but it's in April, right?
It's usually the first week.
I don't have it, I don't have the dates yet.
I thought I saw something, but I can't
I'll be on the
remember.
board.
What?
I don't even know if I'll be on the board then.
There are a lot of questions around the tennis court. Should we try to give an update about that? Like, a lot of questions about, can it be done at the high school, but we know wetlands.
But we don't
but
have
nothing-
that.
yeah.
Not
We
at-
don't
not
have
at
a
the-
plan.
I
We
know.
don't have that
Not at this-
information,
not at
so.
its
So
current-
there's
Well, there
no-
was
There's
a-
nothing we
No.
can share. I
Plan.
just
No.
know there's a lot
We
of
don't-
questions.
We haven't talked about it.
Should look
in
back
our
at
group,
that.
So we can't give
Yeah.
an update.
The plan actually had a TBD location for tennis courts. They
Yeah.
were not-
Yeah.
TBD, so
was
it
never
hasn't been
deed.
decided.
Yeah,
There's a
I mean,
lot.
it was never part of the actual
Okay.
Right, but,
plan. They located them on the school campus. They took parking spaces to do it.
okay.
Yeah.
It's potentially
right.
part of the water treatment
Yeah.
area, yeah. we-
Okay, so even
There's
that,
no-
okay.
there's no even
I
So that
question
old
that.
plan isn't useful. Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
questioned that. It was like, how can you take that?
Old,
That's what I said.
right. Who's on this capital planning finance?
It
Turf?
is myself, Peter, and Janice.
And what,
Oh, yeah,
I-
I'm sorry, I know that.
I heard, how
The
did I
turf
hear
committee.
that?
Dan the Hill's not up here.
How did I don't know how I heard it, but I heard something about the turf fundraiser people were meeting this week or last week
Did
or
we
next
get,
week?
I'll reach out.
or-
Mike,
to me.
did you give them an update by any chance? Or, on that, talking about, that was the last
might
meeting
have
we
seen that
had
on
was
Facebook or
to
something, I
talk
don't
to
know.
them about some kind of agreement for fundraising.
I thought the subcommittee was responsible, it's in their charge as the liaisons.
No.
No, Mike was supposed to,
We met with them,
Mike and,
October?
was
3-4
supposed to get
months
back.
ago.
yeah.
Yeah. that
We,
was
they
the,
came back to see me in
capital
October, and I haven't heard
subcommittee
anything since.
meeting.
So we don't have any update on approval, because last we
No.
said you'd go off and figure out for that approval for what they can do for advertising.
Who's the,
We changed
changed the
their
advertising
advertising
Yeah,
policy.
they need to present like what their plan is.
Well, Mike, they had agreed in the working group that they were gonna discuss it offline, Mike and them, of how they were gonna go about the advertising, then come back.
excuse me.
That's
So
what
he
was
hasn't
the
heard
plan
anything
was.
since like
What?
October. So, and they said you haven't heard anything since like October.
Exactly, so that's
Yeah,
what,
so maybe we should
Be
reach to
proactive and
them.
reach
and
out.
I will reach out to them.
I don't
CC
even know who they are.
Know them? because I'd just like to
So,
get involved, just personally.
do you, I don't have any more of an update other than what I said
Okay.
earlier.
That-
But I
that's
would
fine.
love to get an update if you've met with any of you or Jean have met with any groups, like updates of meetings. Do you have any updates? Because you said you've been meeting, so I wasn't sure if you had any updates on the meetings.
Well, Mike and Jean, well, not to step on it, but they attended the, what was it, joint board of selectmen?
The January 7th BOS
Oh, yeah,
Finance
how did
Committee
that go?
meeting. It was actually quite pleasant. That's the way I can describe it. It was great.
Did you watch the video?
One of the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee are actually talking about assuming the entire cost of the school resource officer in the Hamilton budget for this year. They're gonna let us know. That was one of the pieces.
That would be awesome, especially if,
You know.
because what I heard was that at the Patton Estate, whatever that was, that they could actually have the funds earlier than what they think and then pay for that. I was like, okay.
Yeah, they're looking into it.
They had talked about, they were appreciative that we had included it in the budget because it got them talking about it. So that was my big takeaway from the night.
Yeah.
It still needs to cycle through the budget, though.
Right.
If you think about the regional agreement, you can't preclude any district costs from, operating costs from
Yeah.
our financial structure. So it has to come in. The superintendent in the statute has to be part of the process.
So it'd just be an
And then it
offset.
has to be apportioned
Right.
according to the regional district. If the two towns want to enter in some form of an IMA on the back end on how it's transacted, that's up to them, but it has to come through the school district.
A lot of districts that I was in contact with, it's paid for by the town.
Well, we're
They're
regional,
regional?
so
It-
we're a little
These were
different.
regional districts.
So, but what
So
Jeff
do they
was
have a
saying-
regional agreement that has the same requirements as us?
I don't know, but
Yeah.
That would be
I'm just,
something to look up.
did we look at the MASC intermunicipal agreement, whatever recommended
Well, our
template?
regional agreement requires all expenses to come, cycle through the district, be apportioned, and treated that way.
I know, but the law requires that and I'm just doing this based on what I heard from Chief Stevens, the law is that the police department is supposed to work with the district to assign that person.
Sure.
But that person works for them,
That's
not
right.
for us.
I didn't suggest that the position worked for us, but the position is appointed by the chiefs in coordination with the superintendent.
Right.
The superintendent has the final say on who the person is.
Okay, but how does that make it a district cost? If the person's employment is gonna be
I'm simply referring
Hamilton,
to your regional agreement that says that all operating costs cycle through the district financial statement, and then those costs get apportioned according to the regional district agreement. That's all I'm saying.
right, and what I'm saying is that's not an operating cost of the district, it's an operating cost of the town's police.
It's an operating
Force.
cost of the district.
It's still in our budget because they don't know when they're going to have to fund it.
But when they fund it, they would
And
be
when
funding
they
it for an
fund it.
offset.
How they fund it is entirely up to them.
Right.
And our member towns, but the regional agreement requires all of our operating costs, all of our debt service costs to cycle through the district and be treated in a certain way.
All right, my update was Alex and I had coffee on Sunday, had some, just some clarification questions, and I'm sure I'll be hearing from them for more coffee coming up. So, nothing really groundbreaking happened through there, just trying to keep the lines of communication open. So, and again, happy to do it with any and all of you, so. All right, student rep, anything to report? How's your homework coming?
Midterms on Tuesday.
Yeah. Nothing to report beyond the presentation unless you guys have any questions.
Oh, I have a question about midterm. Do they serve lunch when there's
No,
midterms?
No.
So how does that work? If students are required to be there all day,
They're not.
They're not, they're, from 8 to.
There's no transportation provided to come home. So how do students usually deal with that?
Bring lunch, maybe? I don't know. I know in the past, like, some student organizations have done fundraisers where they sell, like, pizza.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anyone's doing that this year, but.
So how is it that we aren't required to provide, like, free lunch to those who are eligible?
Oh, they're gonna set up a sausage cart
Okay.
out front.
Well, I guess we'll talk about that in the future.
Pay for the turf field.
Good question.
Excellent. You know what I found out the other day that was the weirdest thing to me? That kids in high school don't use lockers. Is that true? They don't use their
That is
lockers?
true.
They just
No,
carry,
they do
like,
not
everything
use
in their
lockers.
bag? That's
Things
so
in their
weird.
No.
That is true,
Carry a
because
bag.
it's too far to go to get to your locker.
Carry a
bag.
50-pound bag around.
Carry your laptop.
It's so weird. It was like blew my mind when I heard that the other day.
No lockers.
We sell them?
Not used.
All right, any other updates? I feel like we're missing something on here. Anyone else? All right, topics for next meeting. After we got this email, those emails of questions, I sort of think I messed up a little asking for questions and whether or not
Budget
what's the word I'm looking for?
Budget workshop.
Budget workshop are necessary, because I think there's sort of two different things, right? Where a workshop should be sort of strategic planning. Excuse me. You know, Jeff, thank you very much for actually taking the time to go through and answer all those questions. And I was going to sort of respond back to the group via email, but now I'm glad I didn't, especially where Michelle hadn't seen anything yet. But I figured I'd bring it up here about where we actually want to put in, and again, sort of throwing it out to everybody, what this workshop should actually look like and when. Wednesdays, as of tonight, are very difficult for me. So adding a meeting for me, I probably couldn't make it. That's not to say that, you know, so one, we want to keep in mind that if we are going to add an additional meeting, make sure that we're actually going to have a quorum be able to attend. And then if we want to add it to, say, the January 30th meeting, we have to be ready for, you know, a marathon meeting, which isn't unheard of at this time of year, but it's something that, you know, I think we all need to at least be aware of moving forward. I have no problems. Like I said, in, you know, the email out when I first asked everybody, my goal is to get everyone on the same board with this budget process, so that come February 13th, we're getting 7 yes votes, and we're going to the town, you know, with the support of, you know, the BS and FinComs, and we're going to town meeting, really believing that this is what's best for our district, and, you know, being able to go out to the public and actually speak confidently about what's in the packets, and, you know, how, and really make sure we get the support come town meeting.
I thought we were gonna do it, last I heard, I thought we were gonna do it January 23rd.
So again, I have to say, coming out, that if we want to add that date, we have to make sure that there's going to be a quorum, because I
That's
know I can't make it.
Short notice.
I know that.
And we would definitely need a direction, because,
That's
yeah, that's a week away, and to try and put together something like that
And a long
would be really
weekend.
difficult, especially without any direction.
You're not.
I responded with my questions. I have several questions that were unanswered after seeing the email on Stacy's thing. So, you asked, I responded.
Right, and so.
And I
I'm
responded
trying to
within
continue the
24
conversation.
hours, so
Because-
my statement stands. I think we need it.
I think we need it too.
So-
I unfortunately couldn't respond right away because I was out of town and I had no access to emails, so,
As
I
it should
think
be when you're
it's-
in Hawaii. No,
I was
and like I
working.
said, I want to make sure, I want to make sure that we're getting these questions answered.
How
It's
do
really
we feel
important.
about the 24th?
So that's a.
What day of the week is it?
It's a Thursday.
But still, we have to bear in mind that anything that we ask to be presented in this meeting has to be done.
So what's the purpose of the workshop, guys?
Right.
I mean, are we gonna sit there and answer questions, or are you gonna talk about capital planning, you're gonna talk about strategic planning, you're gonna talk about
Yep.
the budget recommendation
Yep.
and how you might wanna, you know, shape and mold it into what you ultimately vote on February 13th.
Yes.
I mean, I don't recommend we get in a room and we talk about, why is this account up by $200?
Right.
Right?
It's not a productive use of time.
Excuse me? So again, if we have the need or the members feel that we want to go in and actually be able to discuss strategically what we want to present for this budget or move this budget around, we need to have some sort of direction going in. We don't want to go into sort of blindly and
I
just
think
have an
several
open agenda
members
item.
have questions. I think it's worth spending an hour answering their questions. But I don't know if we're gonna find a date that works for all 7 of us.
Well, I know that, every year I know we've had a budget workshop, and this is the first year we're not having one. And
So-
it kind of helps going over some of these
Last year.
I think we've only
questions
had,
to be able to have a
since
workshop.
I've been here, this is my 6th budget cycle, we've had 1 budget workshop, and it was last year. And we had it because
We missed a meeting.
the committee didn't have a quorum on December 19th when we were planning to present the committee, so Mike and I recommended that we add an additional meeting in the form of a workshop to make up the ground. So that's the only workshop we've ever had
No,
on the
we've had them
budget
before.
in the
No,
last
we've
6
had them
years.
before.
We had one when Roger
All
was
right,
chair.
so
but
it doesn't
Okay.
matter whether we have had or not. The question is, when are we going to have one?
So that's what we're trying to come up
Right.
with now.
I think the question is, does the committee as a
body.
majority want to have a workshop? And then, if they do, what do you want to discuss at the workshop?
I think the answer is yes, and I think there are a lot of questions that people have that they'd like to have answers to.
But we have to understand, a workshop isn't a Q&A period. A Q&A
No.
period is fine, but a workshop is actually
Whatever you wanna
strategic
call it.
development of the budget in in the thought process of the committee as a so I think it's important to sort of differentiate the two. And that being said, I want to do anything that we can to make sure that this budget goes through. If that means, putting in a workshop, then I am for a workshop, no doubt. But again, I can't add any additional meetings at this time. Not on Wednesdays, that's for sure.
I think we need to have the workshop, and I think the thing that we need to have the workshop about is, A, understanding what this will look like as a presentation to town meeting, if there's gonna be an override, what kind of things we're gonna put in the override, and what things we wouldn't get if the override failed. And I think we need to look at, are there things in this budget that we can trim?
I don't like budgeting through fear.
So,
I really don't.
and I
don't-
realize it's level services plus some things, so if we wanna have some plus things, maybe we need to find some ways to
Cut back the
reorganize the level services. I don't know. That's why we need to have the workshop, so that we can ask the people who are in charge of these things what those would look like.
So,
How are we getting someplace?
so
I personally don't like budgeting through fear. I don't like the optics of it. I don't like you must pass this or these things are gonna go. I don't like it. I don't like the way it looks.
just knowing the way Mike and Jeff sort of operate, I don't think they would
It-
sort of present a doomsday scenario. But again, this
It's
is
not a
this is
doomsday
direction.
It's not
scenario.
doomsday,
These
it's
are the
just-
things you're buying with the override. You're buying level services. You're buying whatever,
Just-
OPEB, you're buying, whatever
Just
it is
need
we
to
decide to put in
understand it a
there.
little bit better so
Well,
that
it's not
we
gonna
can make
have
a
an override.
recommendation.
So I mean, but maybe
So
that's part of
something
the-
we need to understand.
Yeah.
So it's just, I guess, going a little bit more in depth and so we get those answers and understand it a little bit better.
What their situation is.
Who?
What?
Hamilton?
Right. Anyway, it's fine.
So,
So if you want to add it to the 30th, but,
I
you
think
know,
I'd rather split
I
that
know
up
with
into
the-
2 days.
I know, I agree, it should be another day as, you know,
Cancel the
he
OPEB
asked, and I know that our bylaws do
Do-
say that 3 people can ask for a meeting.
Can we do I'm looking at dates here,
Maybe we
people.
should, because what if the recommendation comes back that it's, or do you think it's more important to?
I can cancel them.
We can cancel.
Can we do,
It's not critical to the decision to move forward with the fund.
So what we're talking about is trying to figure out if we can't, there's supposed to be a OPEB presentation on the 30th, and possibly canceling that to be able to move this in on the 30th and make it a reasonable meeting.
Right. Got a couple of other things we have to do, but.
That's the school choice hearing night also.
I
Does
can
that
move
mean the
I can
meeting's
move them
gonna
on.
start at 6:30?
No problem.
Yeah,
Correct.
so that'll be a 6:30 start.
Donna usually sends us something to remind us of that. That would be helpful for that.
Or was it just me she sent that to?
She sent it to you to make sure we were gonna set the time,
Yeah.
because she had to advertise it. But
I always forget to check the CC list to see if it's just me or if it's you guys too.
So I'm just saying,
Excuse me.
would have been helpful.
All right, so let's add this to the 30th. I think we have a decent, Cindy, maybe I'll reach out. What's that?
I mean, who's gonna lead the discussion? I have
Yeah,
no
what-
idea what you guys wanna cover.
what do you wanna talk about?
I mean, I'm happy to lead the discussion as I have,
Mhm.
but I have no idea what you
What you
guys
wanna
wanna
talk
cover
about.
in the workshop.
I have some ideas here.
But it's important to hear it from the committee, so we
Right.
don't get here on the 30th, and
And it's not what you want.
it's not what you want.
So,
So, I mean, I think you guys gotta vet this out for us.
Right.
And then we'll help support it.
So what I have here is, you know, an understanding of the impact of it's the 30th, so that would actually be before our joint meeting, right?
Right.
Right.
What was that? I can't hear you guys.
Nothing.
It's
I was
before the
thinking of
joint
that.
meeting on the 5th, so
So where
understanding the
impact on the
town's
town.
impact right now, I don't know.
But,
That's you guys.
so, I'm sure they have a general idea that
Sure
I
they
can reach
do.
out and speak to. You know, I think, and I can't speak, because actually Michelle just left the room, but this would be the, you know, what I said last night, you know, when I'm in looking at an override, you know, if we got rid of the, you know, additional asks over the level services, is that going to negate the override, which, no. But,
Do you want like 10 seconds on that? I mean, if it helps.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
we're not in a position right
Please.
now.
right, that'd be great. Thank you very much, Alex.
Yeah, sure, thanks. So, I mean, obviously.
Thanks for
it's-
staying this late too, guys.
It's good that you're, you know, seeking to understand the position of the towns, and obviously I can't speak for the town of Hamilton. But last year, they were not in, you know, they had sufficient levy capacity such that they didn't require an override, whereas the town of Wenham did, and we're not yet in a position where we know exactly what our level services budget and what other asks above that might or might not be approved and factored into the operating budget will entail. But through open sessions with the Board of Selectmen, you know, we had our department head meetings early on. FinCom was invited guests with BOS, but I don't think that it was a public meeting, of course, but I don't think it was on video, so you may not have seen it. Whether or not you looked at notes, I'm not sure. But at that point, we were facing a pretty substantial fiscal deficit early on, which has not improved through namely a reduction in the expected new growth that we were anticipating. So that, and a couple other factors as well, chief among them, the plug that we had at 3% for the schools. Obviously at you know, 6.2 plus apportionment, which you know all about. So, again, we can't say like, oh yeah, it would be, you know, definite override, or it would be no override if you took out OPEB. I mean, we're not there yet.
Right.
Obviously, we'll let you know as soon as we are. The purpose of our being here is just to understand, obviously, the details in particular, so we can be that much more informed in asking questions.
Okay,
So-
thank you very much for that. Yeah, so, I mean, keeping that in mind, you know, are these conversations we can have on the 30th, right? And I mean, to a degree, maybe, but I mean, is it going to be, how helpful is it going to be?
David, could you talk into your mic?
So I don't know what's going on with
I
the
think,
signal.
I think the question for the workshop really should be, given what we know of what Mike and Jeff are recommending for a budget, do we want to go with that?
Right.
That's really what the question should be.
That's the question, right.
Like, that's all we need to know. Like, if we say no, it should be lower, that gives them direction to come back with a different proposal.
Right.
Right? Or we say, you know what, we're gonna kill OPEB right now, take it off. Then what do you come back with?
Or the committee has a conversation around what is the committee comfortable presenting, right? So if it's
Well-
if it's not our recommendation, what is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
But I don't think the question needs to be, I don't know if we really want to get into strategy yet, because we haven't even settled on the final number. And I think that still needs to be done
No, I
first.
agree.
Yeah. So that's what I would suggest.
But what we can't do is get to, like last year, get to the night of the vote.
Right.
And
Oh, I know.
Yeah, that was.
I'll try to think of how I want to move this forward, because obviously, I think there's the need and there's the want from the committee to do this. Excuse me. While I understand some of Michelle's asks, she just let herself out, so I can't even.
Sorry, she's sick.
To really clarify, you know, and then she just, Mr. Alex had said anyway, you know, it would be premature to, I mean, we could talk about this to a slight degree, but it'd be premature to really talk about it before the joint meeting on the 6th. That doesn't mean that it's not something that we should be keeping in mind, in that we could touch on.
Well, I think there's still a lot, besides knowing what the towns want, there's still a lot of questions that we have pertaining to the budget that we'd like to get answers on and, you know,
Right, so,
to find
but, you know,
out where
but
we
the other thing
sit
too
and,
is like,
you know.
we want to make sure that we're sort of, that this is a process moving on the macro level and not on the micro level, right? And we're not really going to be, because we'd be here for days, you know, going line item by line item, you know, for, you know, not even $100,000, which is what, a third of 1% of the budget, you know, and you know, whereas like we need to be looking, we want to be looking at general direction and like sort of, you know, larger picture strategy and again,
Yeah,
short term.
we definitely need a strategy, but I do know that year after year, we can't just keep increasing. We're gonna have to figure out other ways, and I don't want to do just a level service either, but, you
Right.
know, something's gotta give.
So I mean, I think,
too.
but I also think that we're sort of on that same point with the, you know, okay, well, we want to add this other committee to actually be looking at more of this long-term stuff. You know, there are points where we want to be, you know, that we're definitely going to be melded together, short-term and long-term goals. But at this point, it's like this budget for fiscal year 20, and then also looking ahead,
Yep.
long-term.
And that's why we really think that the strategic planning
Right.
group is
And
really
I
gonna
don't,
help
and I definitely do not
to
disagree
have that
with you
vision.
there. I know you're not happy with that, but,
I couldn't hear you.
so. Well, I'm just sort of being wary of the time, where it's 10:15. Wondering if we could,
Do you want us to cancel the Rockland presentation?
Yeah,
Did we decide that? Okay.
I'll take care of that.
so, thank you. Anything else that wants to be,
What else is scheduled for the 30th?
So we have the public hearing regarding school choice. We're going to start at 6:30, have that hearing. Brian Menegoni, assistant principal at the high school, associate principal at the high school, is working on working on actually a bylaw change for both towns regarding smoking and vaping, and so he wants to come with that to us before he goes forward and actually submits this town meeting warrant article. He wants to make sure he has the school committee's blessing on that. We have the vote on school choice and then budget review.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it.
this?
Quick 10:30 night.
So not even budget review, it's workshop
It's budget workshop, yeah.
to be agenda to be determined by the school committee. Right?
We'll work on
Yep, we'll figure it out.
it. Someone want to make a motion?
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee adjourn at 9:45.
Second.
All those in favor? That's 6 and 7. Tom Lord.
Go for it.